Disc 7.
Part 4. Chapter 25. D.C. Josie Chancellor climbs the stairs up to the top-floor flat. Large black bin liners are piled up outside, smelling of rotted peach. She knocks on the door, tries not to breathe too deep. There's no answer, but in her line you get a knack for knowing when people are in. She knocks again, calls, "Dave! It's Josie!" She hears feet, padding, and the door opens away from her. Pulford looks down, rubbing his eyes. Josie squeezes past him and opens the window that juts from the roof, overlooking the westway. She sniffs the stale air. "Take your bins out, why don't you?" "Mind your own, why don't you?" Josie looks Pulford up and down. He seems unfamiliar, kind of cut adrift. "What have you been up to, David? You look washed out." He disappears into the bathroom and a tap runs. The living room is Spartan. There's a Jim Thompson book on the coffee table, one espresso cup, a brimming ashtray and a stovetop coffee pot. On the dining table, 2 box files. When he returns, Josie says, "I didn't know you smoked." "I didn't know you cared." Pulford's hair is wet, and his eyes have a little more life in them. Jadis Golding is dead. Pulford purses his lips, exhales loudly. Eventually he says, "Good." "Wouldn't you rather we'd caught him?" "Maybe it's best we didn't." Josie thinks she knows what he means, but lets it lie. "Pennington wants us to go down to morgue." "Why? I can take your word he's dead." "Jasmine Cash is going down to identify the body." Pulford rubs his face, says, "So?" "He wants a woman there to comfort her. And he wants someone to police her, too. I thought you'd want to do this." When they get to the city morgue, Pulford lingers in the doorway on Raven Lane, pulling on a cigarette. He says to Josie, "I might say something I'd regret. I'd best stay here." "Pennington wants you in there. He said you might be able to glean something. This is a murder case." "Not one we'll be breaking our backs to solve." "Eyes will be on us." "What?" "It's what Pennington said. When a cop killer's killed, the eyes are on us." "He didn't kill a cop." "You know what I mean." Josie slips her arm through Pulford's. "You can control yourself, can't you, Sarge?" They go down into the basement, and as they enter the pathologist's domain, the high, slender windows onto Raven Lane proffer a pale grey light, saturated with the smell of formaldehyde. Jasmine Cash sits in the corner of the room, hunched beside a trolley shrouded in white linen. Her jaw is set, her mascara jagging, all dried now. Josie crouches beside her, cajoling. Pulford stays in the doorway, watching as Josie persuades Jasmine to her feet, all the time whispering that it will be over soon and there is nothing to fear. He didn't suffer. "You don't care. You want him dead," says Jasmine. Pulford takes a step back. "We don't," says Josie. They're by the trolley now, and with one hand Josie reaches down, takes a hold of the shroud, peels it back, holding on to Jasmine with her other arm. She feels Jasmine go weak, and she clutches her in both arms. "Is it him? Is it Jadis?" "You killed him all right? You killed him proper, didn't you?" Josie hugs Jasmine tight, feels the words cold on her neck. And when they unclasp, Jasmine is staring at the empty doorway. A last time she says, "You killed him." Yusuf sits in his foraged asbestos home. You can hear the sea and smell the diesel fumes from the autopista. They overpower the ozone. He watches his two neighbours make their way to the work truck. They don't acknowledge him anymore. The one in the bull's vest says he brings bad spirits and he should keep away. A red motorcycle pootles down the dirt track, rests up by the nitrophos drum. The rider turns off the engine and walks directly towards Yusuf, beckoning him to stand. The visor is down, and Yusuf remembers something his mother told him about listening to people's eyes. He stays put. "Stand," says the rider, lifting his visor. Beneath, he's wearing sunglasses with silver reflective lenses. Yusuf shakes his head. There comes a time when they can't harm you any more. The rider unzips his jacket, reaches inside, and Yusuf steadies himself. He has nothing to give, so they must do what they must do. "They say you're mute," says the rider, smiling. He pulls out his hand from inside the jacket, and the metal glints silver in the sun. The rider crouches, pushing the metal towards him, and Yusuf can't help but flinch. "Take this." Yusuf shakes his head. The rider reaches for his back pocket, pulls something out and quickly thrusts it at Yusuf's face. "And this." The second weapon is paper. It is 4 500-euro notes. It is as much cash as would pass through Yusuf's pockets in a year. The rider drops the metal into Yusuf's lap. It is circular with a hole in its middle. His neighbours have them. They make music. "You must give this to your friend, the Guiri. That is all. I will take you to where he'll come." Yusuf shakes his head, but grips the notes tightly in his weak fist. The money would buy him drugs to take his pains away. He could send enough to last his sister a year, and he could still buy flour and beans and water to take him through the winter. "You know you are going to come." He shakes his head again. "When you give it him, when we know he has it, there is more. Another 1,000. Yusuf looks at the disc in his lap. He imagines his sister's reaction if he could give her 1,000, and his heart is glad for the first time since the shores of El Andalus rose to meet him 3 long years ago. He could go home without shame. The rider holds out a hand to help him up, but Yusuf shakes his head. Every bone in his body weeps as he stands of his own accord, but his soul sings. Staffe and Peppa drive back to Almachen, climbing steeply on a narrow road etched lazily into the mountain. Every time a wagon thunders towards them, it takes the breath away, makes the heart stop as they veer towards the precipitous, deathly edges. Neither says a word for half an hour as they spiral higher and higher, up the spurs of the Sierra Nevada towards the top of the Ragua Pass, the highest in all Spain. Near the top, slowly approaching a clearing in the cedar woods, Peppa says, "Let's stop," and pulls over to the side, the car lurching to a halt not 6 inches from a fall to certain death. Peppa has to get out on the driver's side. She lights up straight away, looks where they've come from, the parched meseta. What a road! Staffe says, "This is all about Agustin." What makes you say that? There are only 2 roads into Almachen. This might be wild and remote, But it's no place to hide. You can't go missing out here. The gene pool is too small to bury a secret. Someone must know where Agustin is. Morocco is my guess. Closer than that. Pepper says, the boys won't get their fortune if Astrid is still alive. They'd have to prove she's dead. Or otherwise. Staffe nods, wondering if he knows his friend Manolo at all. Yusuf sits in the shade of an olive tree. Up the road, he watches each vehicle that wends its way down from the top of the pass. He takes off his shoe and unfolds the 4 notes. He has never seen such money in his life. He replaces the notes and touches the disc beneath his burnous. He is sad that Guiri is in trouble, thinks he has a good heart. A lorry comes down the steep road, and a little red Cinquecento sticks out its nose trying to get past. Yusuf stands. The car fits the bill, and he readies himself. The lorry's brakes squeal, and it indicates left, to carry on down the main valley towards the sea. The little red car indicates right, and accelerates quickly away from the junction towards Almagen, and him. Yusuf steps out, holding his arms high in the air, standing dead still in the middle of the road. The driver's eyes go wide, and the brakes squeal as the car skids. The road is not wide enough to steer around him, and Yusuf closes his eyes, waits for the impact. "I know this man," says Staffe. "What the hell was he doing? He stepped out in front of my car. Why?" Staffe places a cushion behind Yusuf so he can sit upright on the 2-seater sofa beneath the window in his house. Yusuf's eyes flicker, and he puts his hand into his burnous. His breathing is tight, and he gulps at the air to fill his lungs, pulling out the disc. The young woman takes 2 steps back, as if she's expecting a weapon. He feels his brow soften, and his breathing eases. A strange item to treasure, Staffe thinks, watching the man lean forward, wincing as he places the CD delicately upon the arm of the sofa. Then kicks off the right of his babouche shoes, and reaches into its long toe. Checks a small, many-folded wad of what appears to be €500 notes. Now the African sighs, and even though he is clearly still in great pain, a broad smile opens all the way across his thin face. He reaches for the disc and thrusts it at Staffe. "What is he doing?" Pepper says. "He can't speak." "How do you know he can't?" "Look." Yusuf opens his mouth wide. Pepper puts a hand to her mouth, can't help stare at the pink stem, like a segment of strange, candied fruit, jutting quietly up at the top of his throat. She says to Staffe, "How do you know him?" Staffe busies himself with his laptop at the dining table. He inserts the disc, hunkers over the machine. "Tell me, Gwilly." "I met him down in the plastic. He saw the body." "And you didn't tell me?" "It was before we met. I didn't even know Raoul then." "Christ, Pepper, I told you what he told me, that they buried the day kneeling up and drowned him. It's all I could glean from him, and—" Pepper grabs his sleeve with one hand, points at the screen with the other. She says in the quietest voice, "Look, Gwilly, it's a DVD. Isn't that your friend Manolo?" They each watch the screen. Yusuf squeezes between them, peeking at the man in the cave. He knows him. From that day the Englishman came into his world, changing everything, forever. Manolo looks warily to one side of the camera, and a hand appears. Manolo reaches out, looks at the piece of paper he is given, then holds the paper to camera. Staffe sees his past held up to him like a mirror and gasps. His mother and father on the front page of a Spanish newspaper. He plugs headphones in and moves the cursor over the play button. He taps a key on the laptop with the little finger of his other hand to pause the footage every few seconds, his face screwed up in concentration. Pepper leaves Staffe to it, takes the African up on the roof, where he stands, back perfectly straight, head high, looking across the broad valley through the gap in the Sierra Contraviesa to the V of the Mediterranean. Pepper says, on a clear day you can see the Rif Mountains in Africa. And he nods, his eyes becoming glassy. His chin trembles, and Pepper walks towards him and hugs him. He squeezes her tight as he can, she thinks, but he makes little impression. She goes back downstairs, tells Staffe that Yusuf must stay with them. When he is fit, they'll go with him and make sure that he is safe, and that his shelter is good for the winter. Yusuf sits cross-legged on the bottom step of the stairs. He shakes his head, gestures with clasped hands to his heart that he is grateful, but must be left to his own devices. He doesn't have the language to tell them that he is going all the way home with his unbelievable bounty. Chapter 26. The early morning rattle from inside Bar Fuente is absent today. Staffe follows Pepper and Yusuf inside. Only Frog and Salva are in. Upon seeing Staffe, they both frown. Staffe orders tostadas, coffees, and glasses of fresh orange. Frog snorts. Tostadas? For a Moor? Salva points to a table on the far side of the Commodore, says he will bring their breakfast across when it's ready. As Yusuf and Pepper move off, Salva clamps a tight grip on Staffe's forearm. Hisses, "You shouldn't come here. Not for a while. Wait for the dust to settle." "What?" "You'll lose us all a bundle," says Frog. "Shut up," says Salva. Turning back to Staffe, he says, "Every week I have to come up with my pesetas for this place. I can't have it empty." "What's happened? Where is everyone?" "Up at your friend Edu's matanza," says Frog. "Looks like you and me are the only ones not invited." "Salva, tell me what's happened." "The mayordomos were called up by the junta, and that ghost you dug up in your sister's wood has got everyone running scared. Our plans for the academy are being put on hold. You should have let it stay put." "Fucking bad timing," says Frog. "Now get out," shouts Salva, grabbing Frog's half-drunk Soli Sombra, and when Frog has gone, cursing to himself, Salva says to Staffe, "And when you're done, Gwilly, maybe you'd go too. I have my business to consider." Matanzas are all-day affairs, starting at dawn and involving many men slaying a pig, then drinking all day. Frog hadn't quite got it right, because Staffe is invited. The last time he had seen Edu, his friend had positively insisted that he attend. Peppa is going to the Ayuntamiento in Messina to use their office suite. On the way, she dropped Yusuf back at the house and Staffe at the bottom of the trail up to Edu's. As Staffe climbs the steep track, his thoughts soon return to the DVD Yusuf delivered. He can replay it in his mind now, frame by frame. The running time is barely a minute, but he had pored over it for an hour, and in that time he gleaned 2 clues as to Manolo's whereabouts. In the first 2 seconds of running time, the camera shifts, as if it was bracketed to a ball-and-socket tripod plate that was being adjusted. As the shot ducked, Staffe had hit pause. He missed it the first time, only got a glimpse on the third viewing, but the frozen image was certain. On the ground, maybe 2 feet in front of Manolo, was a pine cone. They used pine cones up in the mountains instead of firelighters. They burned just fine and cost nothing. And at the end of the short film, Manolo had put down the newspaper, which rustled. He had sighed and a moment of silence followed, punctuated by a single strike of a cowbell. So quiet you wouldn't hear it unless you were listening for it. But Staffe was, holding his breath and with his hands clamped over the earphones. It would not have been a cow, but a goat, a bell around its neck should it stray from the flock. It is all Staffe needs to restart his search for Manolo. On the final 100 yards up to Edu's cotijo, pig squealing and drunks baying, he takes a hard look up the mountain to where they take goats for summer, and prime fires with pine cones. He wonders if those clues have been too readily uncovered, whether it is a subtly laid trap luring him to Manolo's cotijo. But he has to go, to get hold of Manolo's copy of Gustav Hesse's will and translate it. From the shade of a fig tree, just beneath the road that Raúl Gutierrez drove along en route to his death, Staffe watches a pig held down on a bench at the front of Edu's cotijo. Each of its trotters is tied taut to iron rings. Edu is smoking a fat cigar and rolling a smouldering bushel of thyme across the pig's back, shoulders and legs, singeing the hairs. Staffe counts 13 men gathered around the pig, each clutching a tumbler of spirit, each with a wagging cigarette of black tobacco. The air is thick with profanity and advice. The women gather by the doorways, ready to boil up the chitterlings and make morcilla and salchichas. The men will butcher the main cuts, set about the curing of the jamones and the creation of chorizo. Edu sharpens his knife a last time and cuts the pig's throat. Every last drop of blood is drained. One of the 13 does the rounds, pouring hooched aguardiente. Edu chain-smokes his way through the butchery, employing a large bladed knife, then a cleaver and a saw. The women ferry the cuts inside, and before long every last bit of the pig, from its ears all the way to its trotters, have been harvested. Edu stands over the remains, quite exhausted. Someone hands him a beer, which he swigs down in one. Staffe moves out from the shade of the fig tree towards the carousing herd. One by one, as they clock him, they fall silent. He holds out his bottle of Lafroig to Edu, who stands steadfast with a cleaver in one hand, his beer bottle in the other. Most of the men know Staffe. They would nod or say hola down in the campo or on a paseo. Now they blank him. "You came," says Edu, forcing a smile. "You told me to bring a fancy whiskey." Staffe reaches out with a bottle. "This is the best I could do." "My hands are full," says Edu, motioning with his bloody cleaver. "He's got some nerve," says a man Staffe doesn't know. Staffe slowly looks each of the 13 men in the eye. He says, steady as he can, "What was I supposed to do? Let it lie? Fill it back in and pretend it never happened?" "You could have waited." "And how long were you going to wait, Edu?" "Wait for what?" Staffe wants to ask him about his niece and how he came to be a pallbearer at Barrington's funeral, but he knows this is not the time. "I'm not going to conceal the truth. I thought those days were over." In these parts, plenty of folk got lucky from the war and its aftermath under Franco, some building wealth first-hand. Others growing fat on the bacon their fathers cured, like Edu. But again, Staffe realises this is not the time for home truths. He wonders how many of this 13 might know already exactly what happened in those woods. "And anyway, if discovering that body is going to jeopardise the academy, that should suit you." "I don't know what you mean," says Edu, lowering his voice. "Well, that's what you said. You didn't want people coming here, disturbing the way things are." Edu regards his one-time friend like a firework that has fizzled and not gone off. He takes a step towards him. "I think you got me wrong." He reaches out to Staffe, dropping his bottle. It smashes at his feet, but he keeps hold of the cleaver. With his free hand in a fist, Edu takes a final step, all the time looking Staffe in the eye, a look Staffe hasn't seen before. He brings the hand down, opening its fist and slapping the Englishman on the shoulder, heavily, decisively. "Let's drink. Today is a day for forgetting," says Edu, taking the Laphroaig from his English friend. "Tomorrow we remember," says one of the men. One by one the 13 laugh, smoothly reprising their drunkenness. They forget well up here. Pepper presses send, and feels the tug as her copy is spirited into her editor's inbox. The story is out of the bag and has ceased to be truly hers, but this tug is not so great. This article on Barrington's Alpujarran legacy is the thinnest crust to the real story, and she doesn't care what the editor does with it. The clerk comes across with a glass of tea, and for a while Pepper relaxes, lets recent events ebb, flow, and soon her fingers bring up the La Lente archive and she types Wagstaff and Gutierrez into search. She thinks what good friends those two men might have been had they known each other better. The search is entered, and to her astonishment there is a result. No, 2 results. These men, whom the Englishman swears came together entirely by chance, are united by 2 pieces which Raúl Gutierrez had written. The first is from the day after the Omar bombings by the IRA, which claimed Spanish lives. She remembers it being on the news. The piece is a double-spread feature on terrorism and the flimsiness of the Basque case for nationalism. The killing of the Spaniards in Omar resulted in a reappraisal of ETA's activities, and the main body of Raúl's piece is an assault on the duality of these campaigns for national identity. As the IRA drew innocent Spaniards into their bloody activities, so had ETA, killing 3 British tourists in an attack on a restaurant in San Sebastián. On the right-hand page, there is a picture of Paul and Enid Wagstaff together. The father wears a Panama hat, smiling straight into camera. The mother makes a faltering connection with the lens. Part of her seems to be elsewhere. Pepper thinks how much Will is like his mother. Raúl makes a passing reference to the children, Marie, a gifted musician, and William in his first year at Oxford. Both William and Marie abandon those paths. She clicks on the second article. Santi Echevarría held a junior position on a council for the Basque Nationalist Party, then stood for election to the Regional Congress. He failed by a narrow minority, and a month later his cousin, Justo, died in police custody. Justo was a schoolteacher with a young family and was also a party activist. The day after Santi buried his cousin, he resigned his post on the council and retreated into the hills to get trained. Santi Echevarría's pièce de résistance was the Donostia bombing. Apart from the Wagstaffs and another English tourist, Santi's expertly crafted bomb killed a group of 4 students from Austria, an elderly couple from Burgos, and 2 waiters, one a Spaniard from Galicia, the other an Euskadi, one of his own, a fully paid-up party member. After Santi's day in the sun, he was never seen again. Family, party, ETA, and the police all deemed him inactive. Disappeared, though he was on Prime Minister Aznar's list of people to talk to after the March 2004 Madrid train bombings. Nobody knows where Santi Echevarría stands these days, let alone where he lies low. But for some reason, Raúl Gutierrez seemed to have his number. "Can I print this, please?" Pepper asked the clerk. The clerk nods enthusiastically, eager to please. She's only 20, and has all her life ahead. Pepper isn't even 30, but today she feels old. "Are you finished yet?" asked the clerk. "One more thing," says Pepper. "I might be a while. Is that okay?" The clerk beams a broad smile, says she will make more tea. It is as if she has all the time in the world. Chapter 27. This year's lomo al horno has been butchered, cooked and eaten, and last year's old wine, too fermented, too damn strong, is drunk. The 13 men have found shade and siesta. Staffe and Edu are the last ones sitting, Edu carving off chunks of his cousin's used cheese. They have it with a controversa reserva that Staffe knows is €30 a pop. He also knows Edu doesn't work, and because he signs on, he has to do a bit of work on the roads when they fall into disrepair. At Christmas and fiestas, the council put him in a gang to erect the lights. He sells the odd bean to the cooperative too, and he drives a brand-spanking Land Cruiser, favours anejo rum in his Cuba Libres. Even without his visits to the Russian girls down on the coast, it doesn't add up. Staffe remembers what his bastard niece Guadalupe had said about Edu not having anything to do with Barrington because he couldn't make any money out of him, and how he parks the blame for where his life went wrong, the shame that was visited upon him, courtesy of Barrington. "This is fine stuff," says Staffe, sipping his wine respectfully. "I know the grower, he does me a deal. It would be wasted on this lot." "You lead a grand life for a peasant," Staffe jokes. Edu laughs. "You are a friend, Gwilly, but you need to tread more carefully. The people here will forget, but you have to meet them halfway." "You're right, Edu. Wise words. Friends and family are important." "The most important thing." "I told you about my parents, didn't I?" "A terrible thing." "I told Manolo, too." Staffe cuts off a chunk of used cheese with a goat's head knife, the one that was shoved into his mouth in Sacramonte. He offers it to Edu, off the blade. Edu stares at the knife, says nothing, and takes the cheese. "That journalist, Raoul, who drove past here just a few minutes before he died, was going to see the man who murdered them. My God, it can be a small world. He tracked him down to a place in Estremadura. Have some more wine." "You didn't tell Raoul about my parents, did you, Edu?" He takes a sip of the wine. "I'm sorry, you didn't know him, did you? I must be getting drunk." Edu wraps his hand around the goat's head of the knife. "How is Manolo? We feared he might have done something stupid." He cuts a slab of cheese, hands it to Staffe. "You're not exactly friends, are you?" "We got along all right. In small villages you can know too few people. Know them too well." "How well did you know his mother?" "I didn't care for the way she carried on." "I've heard some ripe old tales about what went on up here with Barrington and the American." He nods up towards Jackson's cotijo. "I don't suppose that reflected too well on you and the family." "It was nothing to do with me." "I suppose they kept it secret." "You and your secrets. Just because you don't know something doesn't make it a secret." "I saw Immaculada the other day." "She doesn't see anybody." "You must have hated Barrington." "Not at all." "So you've forgiven your sister?" "It's not a question of that." "But you carried his coffin." He says, quick as light, "Immaculada was too small to carry, so she asked me, what was I supposed to do?" "How long is it since you've seen her?" "She's ill, Edu, very ill. I know what it's like when we leave things unsaid." "You could have fooled me." It's terrible when the words are trapped and the people who they are meant for aren't here any more. It must be like that for Rubio. Well, his wife's not dead. She was never found. Found? She left, that's all. She should never have come here in the first place. You must wonder what happened to Astrid. Such a beautiful woman. I bet someone knows where she went. A car grinds up the hill, throaty. Staffe puts down his empty glass, stands up and stretches theatrically. Funny, Raoul coming up here and planning to visit Estremadura to see the man who killed my parents. It's strange how things connect. Maybe they are just two actions. It would establish a hold over me. Keep me in my place, he laughs. If there was a chance I could catch up with that murderer Estebateria. Edu looks over Staffe's shoulder, and his face slips a little. The Guardia Land Rover comes to a halt, and Quesada gets out, tweaking his moustache. Here, have your knife back. I'm going to make coffee for this herd of old goats. Peppa is out of the loop. There is finite information in the world, and this is what journalists are up against, chasing the same things as each other. Every now and again you get a step ahead. That's what Peppa has done. But now she must look through the other end of the telescope, see what everyone else has seen while her eyes have been focused on the past. She's reading the news agency's feeds for the last week, and keeping a particularly keen eye on anything to do with the death of Raul Gutierrez and the murdered Dane. Nothing tasty emerges. Most of the noise around Almeria focuses on the council's inability to borrow funds. Talk is of rubbish piling up on the streets, and no fiesta lights at Christmas. Perhaps Peppa chose a good week to be away. She clicks on Today's Streaming and waits for the files to load. The clerk smiles at her. All morning, Peppa is the only person who has been in the Ayuntamiento. Peppa has one finger on the function key, another on page down, and the minutes fly by. She pauses briefly to read that 57 minutes ago, the head of the council in Roquetas del Mar called for the acceleration of legalizing illegal homes. She presses her finger again, and the headlines flurry. Then, her fingers pull away from the keyboard as if they are scalded. Peppa catches her breath, double-clicks on the headline, gets a one-paragraph summary. 44 minutes ago, police in Mojacar reported the death of a foreigner. Unidentified, the body was washed up onto rocks between Mojacar and Garrucha. The local brigada said the body was handed to the police in Almeria as they had received fresh intelligence about hashish trafficking from Africa, and were liaising with forces all along the coast as far as Algeciras. Peppa asked the clerk if she can print again, and the clerk leaps into action, hovers over the printer, and hands the pages to her precious client. Going down the stairs, intent upon collecting the Englishman, Peppa considers whether she has missed the real story here. Another foreign body on the coast. Narcotics are in the air, and foreigners too. The farmers are fighting back against the golf developers. Should she be down there? Not up here. The clerk sits at the workstation. The journalist's seat is still warm, and she looks out of the window, watches her car rolling over the speed bumps. Then clicks the computer's print history icon. She hits the print command, and back at her own desk, Señorita Sanchez reads each of the pieces once, then calls her uncle, returning to the warm seat in the window, waiting for him to pick up. As I remember him, Agustin was everything Manolo was not, says Quesada, accepting a glass of Lafroig. You talk as if he's a thing of the past, says Staffe. That boy is a thing of the past, as far as we are concerned. He went back to Germany to live with his grandparents. They wanted him to go to a German university. Once Rubio went to the funny farm, he was never coming back. Wasn't he here a few weeks ago? If he was, he behaved himself. I didn't see him. What do you think happened to Astrid Kano, Brigada? She was out of her element here. She found something that suited her better. And left her sons. She was a strange woman. Comisario Sanchez would have known her. Wasn't he in Almagen in those days? He lived in Messina, but he was based here for a while. So he'd have known Raoul. You should ask him about it. Quesada smiles, as if he has won a point. And he left soon after Astrid disappeared. People come and people go, Senor Wagstaff. Why exactly did Sanchez leave Almagen? Look where he is now. That kind of ambition needs a bigger cage. Staffe thinks that cage is a strange word to employ. He studies the unflappable small town Quesada. Was Sanchez in on the paintings, Brigada? You shouldn't ask me such things. A commissario in on something? Please. I like you, Inspector, but you shouldn't place me in such a position. Barrington reinvented himself late in life and produced his best work. That would attract Astrid, and Jackson too. Almagen must have been quite a place back then. I'll tell you what I know, Inspector. Please do. I know Jackson Roberts trafficked drugs. He gave you information, and you turned a blind eye to him and built a career. Please! Quesada takes a deep breath. How do you get on if you never listen? I said I know Roberts dealt drugs, and I know your brother-in-law was here years before you paid for your sister's place. Paolo de Benuto could be in custody like that. He clicks his fingers. I have a file on him this thick. He holds his hand out, as if placing it on a child's head. And he's growing weed up there now, and your pregnant sister knows all about it. Well, you haven't arrested him. Maybe he and Jackson knew what was in those woods when Jackson got him to buy the land. Maybe you knew. But the important thing for you to understand is if I know these things, then others do too. You mean Comisario Sanchez? I can't answer that, says Quesada, closing his eyes and crossing his hands in front of his face, signalling that his patience is exhausted. They each take another draught of the good stuff. Staffe waits, eventually says, with your contacts, would you be able to find out where Santi Estebateria is? Could you help me? That's a very uncertain world you'd be entering, Inspector. He smiles, points at Pepper walking quickly towards him. Knowing that she comes bearing news, Quesada walks past Staffe, says under his breath, There's another body. Be careful, Inspector. Chapter 28. Peppa is looking across the Sierra through the telescope on El Nido's terrace. She breaks off to call Staffe to hurry up. We have to get to Mojácar. Inside Marie's cortijo, Staffe watches Harry pack his small world into a medium-sized suitcase. I don't see why we have to move down to the village, says Marie. The baby is coming. What if there are complications, says Staffe. Complications? You think I'm in danger up here, don't you? Why would I be in danger in my own home? Paolo sits on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Marie knows something is wrong because Paolo isn't high, and he seems happy they're going down to the village. She says, "Are you packing, Paolo?" "I have things to do here. I'll follow you." "You have to come, Marie," says Staffe, kneeling beside her. He wraps his arms around her. "Please, just do it. All I want is for no harm to come to any of you." "You're going to have to tell me what's happening, Will." "I can't." "Then I won't go." "I want to go," shouts Harry. Staffe reaches into his pocket and unfolds the printout of Raoul's article on the Omar and Donostia bombings. He hands it to Marie. She gasps, puts her hand to her mouth, and slowly her eyes become glassy and red. But she begins to smile. "I haven't ever seen this photograph before. Mum looks like you, Will. I always thought you looked like Dad. But you were hers, weren't you?" "Was I?" Marie reads the piece, says quietly so Harry can't hear, "Gutierrez. He's the one who died. He wrote this years ago, and then he comes up to our mountain and he drives his car off a bridge. Christ, Will. And there's more, isn't there? He was up here while you were ill. I told you I'd seen him snooping. And that body in the woods, it's not from the war, is it?" "You and Harry need to take my house until the baby is born. We'll know more soon, and everything will be all right, I promise." Marie wants to believe Staffe, the way you always want to believe everything your father says to you. She hugs her brother tight, says, "I love you, Will. You know that. But it's not your promise to make, is it? You can't promise everything will be all right." She looks at Harry, who despite everything is suddenly happy behind his eyes. A loud knock resounds on the door. "I have to get going," calls Pepper. "And I've seen goats up by Manolo's cortijo." "I heard bells the day before yesterday," says Marie. "Manolo must be back. He'll be taking them up the Silla Montar. You're practically in Granada once you get over there." Many years ago, Barrington convened long parties for his London set. Artists and novelists, musicians and poets. In his memoirs, he claimed to have walked from Granada to Almagen in a single day with his friend and playboy Wesley John. The second day Staffe spent in Almagen, a young, fresh-faced, aspiring writer had collapsed through the doors of Bar Fuente on the stroke of midnight. He said over and again, "Fucking Barrington! Bastard liar!" The young writer had set off from Granada at 3 o'clock that morning in the steps of Barrington. His fact was Barrington's fiction. Staffe looks at the Silla Montar, imagines someday climbing it, ambling down into the great city, the opposite way the last Moor had come. He remembers what the Moor's wife had said when he wept salt tears at leaving his beloved Granada. "Don't cry like a woman for what you couldn't fight for like a man." He says to Pepper, "I have to go up there." "To Manolo's cortijo? Well, you think that's where they're holding him? It's probably a trap." "There's something up there I need to get." "Gustav's will? I bet it's not all that's waiting for you." "I have no choice. Manolo is my friend, Pepper." "You can't be sure of that. And I can't come with you. I have to get down to Oaxaca. Try and get to see that new body." "There's no point trying to persuade him," says Marie, hugging her brother. "He won't be told until it's too late." The goat bells knock out a soundtrack to the last 100 yards of Staffe's climb up to Manolo's place. Smoke rises from inside the cortijo, and 2 red Bultaco scrambling bikes lean against the goat shed. Staffe needs to get his head straight before he goes in. All the way up, he's been trying to work out what enticed Raoul up here 2 weeks before the Dane even died in the plastic. Could it be something to do with himself and Santi Estebateria? He pictures Estebateria buying the components for the bomb and staking out the restaurant, setting the device's timer for the precise moment his parents were murdered. And then, with the smell of charred skin still thick on the Vizcaya seafront, penning his letter claiming responsibility. Months earlier, when Estebateria had lost his cherry, shooting a policeman in the head at point-blank range, he sent the widow a letter, asking if he could have his bullet back. Now, wanting to rebuild his life, Estebateria has said he is sorry. And the idea that he is granted some kind of amnesty makes Staffe more angry than ever. To think that such a man might access the motors of repentance. Staffe feels the bile. He wraps himself around it, keeps it safe, like a mother would her young. He looks up to the tree line. Beyond the cortijo, there are pines and cones. And to the right, beneath the Silla Montar, he sees the opening to a cave. They are here. Peppa is up on Staffe's roof, looking down into the valley. A couple of houses away, a pretty woman pegs out washing, a daughter at her skirts. Peppa shouts across to ask if she has seen a Moor in the village. Consuela points into the valley, says, "Where the Armand stop? He's by the 3rd orange tree." Peppa narrows her eyes, scans the landscape. Eventually she sees Yusuf, shouts to Consuela, "Where is he going?" "Along the Camino Barrington." "Where does it lead?" Consuela says quietly, but in such a way that the sound carries, clear as turquoise shallows, "To the sea, of course." Then Harry appears, starts talking to the little girl. They sit on the low wall on the edge of the roof, 40 perilous feet above the narrow street below, holding hands, in a different world. Peppa's phone chimes, indicating that she has a signal, and she immediately leafs through her address book, highlighting Jesus. He picks up straight away, says, "3 guesses why you call me now." "Have you heard about the body down in Mojaca?" she says. "Why else would you call?" "Well, you said you'd take me for dinner." "Bad timing," says Jesus. Peppa imagines somebody coming into the room he is in. "Are you unable to talk?" "That's right." Peppa constructs questions to which he can answer yes or no. "Have you seen photographs of the body?" "No." "But is he a foreigner and a druggie like Jens Hansen?" "From what I hear." "I'll be there about midnight."
"I am not sure," he says.
"In the Parador, and then we'll go to the morgue."
"I'm not so sure I can."
"You've got to get me into that morgue, Jesus. You're involved. Manolo's your cousin. He's in danger, and it's something to do with—" The line falls dead. No signal. Staffe knocks on the door to Manolo's cortijo. He does it lightly, and the weaker part of him wishes the place empty. He presses his ear to the wood, hears someone being berated. He thinks it is Jackson's voice, and he walks around the building, tries to peer in through the windows, but the shutters are closed. He treads lightly back to the main door and gently levers the latch. It relents easily. He steps inside, and nobody is in the main room. The sounds are coming from the side room. It is definitely Jackson's voice. Staffe feels for the goat's head knife, runs fingers over its handle in his pocket. Staffe recalls the last time he was here and visualizes where Gustav's will is. There is the trunk in the left-hand room, and he should try to retrieve it now. but he hears a louder noise. "My God," says Jackson. Staffe peers into the amber-lit gloom. Jackson is sitting on the bed, his clothes covered in blood. The bed is crimson, and lying across his lap is Manolo, his head in Jackson's arms and staring straight at Staffe. His tongue is hanging from his mouth, throat slit. And Staffe steps into the room, his heart racing, his legs weak, his voice cracking as he says, "What have you done, Jackson?" "I found him like this. He was already dead when I got here." "I walked all the way here, and nobody passed me. I didn't see a soul the whole time." Staffe's legs are weak, and he sinks to the floor, feels sick. Jackson's eyes are wild, but he talks quietly. He had no kind of life, not really. He didn't have a chance, not after what happened. He gently slides his legs from underneath Manolo's body and eases him down onto the blood-drenched sheets. He stands, walks towards the chest beneath the window, and picks up a knife by the tip of its blade. "This is what did for him." Staffe looks on open-mouthed as Jackson comes towards him holding the knife by its blade. The handle is awfully familiar. A goat's head carved from wood. Jackson says, "You seen this before?" "One just like it was stuffed into my mouth. And that was you, wasn't it?" "You really have it in for me, don't you?" "If you didn't kill him, who did?" "You're the fucking detective." Jackson walks past Staffe into the living room and lights up a cigarette. Staffe says, "You know Manolo and Agustin stood to inherit a fortune. Their grandfather is dead. When did I turn from being a bad son of a bitch into a goddamn oracle? But they would only gain if their mother is dead, which she's not. So where is she? And what did she do wrong, Jackson?" "Oh, plenty. It was all fucked up. But I don't know where she is." "Didn't they bury Astrid up in Paolo's woods? Isn't that why you got him to buy the land, to keep an eye on it? You have a hold over him." "When you say they, who exactly is they?" "I can't say who killed her, but I know you were having an affair with her, and Rubio knew it." "I love that woman with all my heart, but never quite enough. And yes, Rubio knew. But it was all right, it really was. We got along." "Maybe Rubio killed her. I saw a film of the four of you. Or did Manolo find out? Or Agustin?" "Agustin?" Jackson looks ruffled. "You were all onto a nice little number, getting fat off the art. That was Barrington's game. But then he lost it, and you were left with a world-renowned artist who couldn't do it any more. But you can paint, can't you, Jackson?" "Nice of you to say so." "That painting of Gador in your Cotijo is one of yours. I've seen one similar." "There are no others like it." "I bumped into your friend Yolanda. She knows an interesting item when she sees it." Jackson walked around the table. "Knew it, you bastard! You didn't think you could just get away with just taking it, did you? I need that canvas. What you've done is theft." Staffe keeps an eagle eye on Jackson Roberts, puts his hand in his pocket, feels the goat's head. "Is that why you lured me here? To get your precious canvas?" Jackson goes into the bedroom. Staffe calls to him. "Passing your stuff off as Barrington's is fraud." From here, Manolo looks as if he might be sleeping off a heavy one. In the low light, the sheets look brown. Jackson comes back into the room with the murder weapon. He places it heavily on the table,
I need that painting, Wagstaff. You're going to give it to me.
The last Barrington?
Why don't you just knock up another? Don't be a prick. He's dead.
Ah, what you mean is nowadays they can carbon date when a piece was painted.
Your game is up. Just one left, hey, from when he was alive. Before, there was plenty to go round. I bet you couldn't paint them quick enough. You prick. Was Astrid onto you?
Staffe turns to look at dead Manolo.
Oh, Manolo, I didn't kill him. I got here half an hour ago and it was already done.
You were holding him all that time? Jackson, drenched in Manolo's blood, holds out his arms like Christ.
I saw him grow into a man. His father is a friend, for God's sake.
And you loved his mother.
But you used him to lure me up here.
Staffe reaches into his pocket, takes a grip of his goat's head knife.
I didn't say that.
You made that film. Jackson sees him, shoots out a hand and grabs the handle of a bullwhip from the dresser. Staffe feels a terrible pain on his neck and in the same instant hears the clap from the whip. The leather tail is around Staffe's throat, and as he tries to pull it free with both hands, his own knife clatters to the stone floor. Jackson walks backward, tightening the grip on Staffe's throat, and Staffe has to follow, banging into the table, squealing because his windpipe is more and more constricted. Jackson stops.
You pick up tricks in war, Inspector. Once in Vietnam, it took a slope 2 shoulders and a knee before he coughed up where his best friend was. But he coughed up. So we'll get there.
He drops the handle of the whip, takes a step forward and gets Staffe's arm up his back. Expertly, he twists the shoulder joint to the very cusp of dislocation.
Now, tell me your theory, my friend.
Staffe's throat burns.
Barrington had lost it, and you tried painting one for him. It was good. He worked on them with you. To be safe, you sold them abroad to known collectors. Barrington gave the provenance, and you split the money, enough for everyone. Then Astrid got greedy.
But she was a rich heiress, remember?
She got greedy for you. She wanted to be with you and threatened to expose you all. Any one of you could have killed her.
Jackson says, nice theory, but you don't know she's dead. And as for that body in your sister's woods, it's a man, a ghost from the war.
We'll see about that. But what about Raoul? Was he onto you?
Where is my painting?
Is it the last Barrington?
Where is it? Jackson has a tight grip on Staffe's bent arm.
I'll fucking break you, man.
Who killed that man in the plastic?
I'll do it, believe me.
Staffe knows Jackson will do it.
You were near the bridge when they cut Raoul out of his car. I saw you up the mountain on your motorbike. Someone stopped Raoul on that bridge, and my guess is they struck him, killed him and tried to stop the blood by using a rag. They put him back in his car and belted him in.
I told you. I'll do it. I'll break your fucking arm.
Raoul never wore a seatbelt.
Staffe feels the squeeze. He holds his breath. He read somewhere once, or did someone tell him, if you hold your breath, if you starve the blood and heart and brain of oxygen, and you suffer great shock, you can... He closes his eyes, and the weight of Jackson on him feels more distant. He hears the crunch, a grisly, softened crack dampened by ligament. His arm falls loose. The pain is white-hot, and something in Staffe shuts down. He hears his name,
Far away, and a harsh, dark descends, with Jackson saying, "You'll never know. You'll never know." On the strike of 10, Pepper fires up the Cinquecento. The rolled-up canvas is on the back seat, still wrapped up in the rug. She looks around the Plazetta a last time, wonders where Staffe has got to. But there is no time to wait for him. She has to meet Jesus.
End of Disc 7. Disc 8.
Chapter 29. Standing over the Englishman, Quesada mops his brow. He can see immediately from the splay of his arm that Inspector Wagstaff has suffered a dislocation to his shoulder, that the pain has caused him to pass out. The Brigada turns Staffe onto his back, holding the arm as he does so. He sits on the floor and places one boot under the Englishman's jaw and the other against his rib cage. Then he takes a firm hold of the arm and pulls, slowly finding the socket with the orphaned ball of the joint. It clicks back, rehoused. Staffe grunts, and his eyes flicker, and his good arm shoots across, holds his bad one, and he howls. Quesada says, "I told you to be careful, my friend." He hands him 3 600 mg ibuprofen tablets and a glass of water, and watches as Staffe warily accepts, scrutinizes, then swallows them. "Roberts did this to you?" says Quesada. "Did you see him?" "Were there 2 Bultacos here when you arrived?" "Yes." "There's only one now. I think I saw him going over the top." "Si a montar. He'll kill himself." "We should be that lucky," says Quesada. "Would it suit you to have him out of the way?" "What makes you say such a thing?" "Well, you had Roberts over a barrel. He was bringing drugs up from Africa, but you came to an arrangement, arresting people up and down the chain. It's how you climbed the ladder." "We bring as much justice as we can, not thinking we can win, but aiming to lose by as little as possible." Which just so happened to free Jackson to pass off his paintings as Barrington's. They made small fortunes. Quesada runs his thumb and forefinger down along his moustache. He smooths it in this manner a dozen times. Then he shakes his head. "Fuck me." "What?" "For years I tried to work out what was going on. I knew they were up to something." Staffe thinks, they? He says Astrid worked it out and tried to blackmail them. That's why they killed her. You can't be sure she is dead. We've had it confirmed it's not Astrid Cano in that wood. Quesada puts on a rubber glove and holds up the goat's head knife. Its blade is smeared with blood. 13 people saw you with this at Edu's Matanza. And so did I. There is another one, I swear. They're identical. And whoever had it killed Manolo. I saw Jackson with it. I am a simple man, Inspector, so I have to look everywhere. I work slowly, and I do not jump from A to C. Come with me. Staffe nurses his bad arm by supporting the elbow. The painkillers are beginning to kick in, but he still feels woozy from the pain. He straightens up, feels better now that he is standing. Following Quesada into the bedroom, he is surprised that the Brigada has turned his back, has left a knife on the table. Once in the bedroom, Quesada goes to the far side of the bed, careful not to disturb the sheets or any of the articles on the floor. He takes a torch from his pocket, illuminates the stone floor, and beckons Staffe.
He explains where Manolo must have been killed. His throat slit and left to bleed to death, face down. To the right, a strange pattern of blood, away from the main pooling of blood. They crouch as one. Together, they softly say the word that has been spelt out by a single finger in Manolo's own blood. Edu. Staffe stares at the body, then at the name in blood. He says to Quesada, "Was Edu involved? Oh my God, he hated Barrington. All he ever really had was his family's reputation. First, Barrington defiling poor Edu's sister. Or then Manolo must have wanted the truth out. The truth about the paintings. The truth about his mother," says Staffe. "So he pulled my strings. Can we go through his pockets?" Quesada hands Staffe a clutch of clear evidence bags. "I've done it." Staffe examines the items. A picture of Astrid embracing Manolo. He must have been 14, just before she went missing. Over €1,000 in large denomination notes. Finally, a small roll of high-strength baling twine. "You have seen that before," says Quesada. Staffe nods, remembering how the body in the plastic had been trussed into its kneeling position, the twine cutting into the neck. "Do you know anything about the other druggie who was washed up?" "In Mojácar," says Quesada. He shakes his head. "Manolo was my friend," says Staffe, breaking down. "I'd like a moment alone." Quesada takes back the evidence bags. "A moment." The instant Quesada leaves, Staffe rushes into the next room. He steps over his friend's body, saying a prayer, but he keeps on moving, lifting the lid on the chest and rummaging quickly for Gustav Hess's will. It's not there. Outside, the horn toots. He empties the chest, checks again, then hears footsteps coming back into the cortijo. He piles everything back into the trunk and leaves, none the wiser, but knowing for certain that whatever is in that will is worth concealing. Staffe knows that Peppa will be on her way to Mojácar and would have taken the last Barrington. He leans the Red Bull taco against the gatepost of Edu's cortijo, watches the lights on Quesada's Land Rover dim and die. Getting out of his Land Rover, Quesada withdraws his pistol from its holster. He has a tremor in his voice when he says, "I have never killed a man." "You surprise me," says Staffe. "Have you?" "No." Even with all the death that has crossed Staffe's path, he is still unable to imagine what it demands, to take a life. Save one. Save Santi Echevarria. So often he has fantasized that bloody murder. "But you like to. Let me warn you, my friend, Echevarria is not to be touched. ETA have surrendered arms, and is not the time to rattle his cage." Standing on the terrace, Staffe looks at Edu's door. He thinks back to the long, lazy afternoons they spent here, when Edu would tell him about his crops and the Contraviesa wine. And he thinks, too, about all the more important things that Edu never talked about. His sister, her lover, the man whose body he carried to be buried. He says to Quesada, "Why did Edu carry Barrington's body at his funeral, if he hated him so?" "Perhaps he was happy to see the man buried. Or maybe he did it for his sister. I prefer the second option. And he is from a proud family. His father was the mayor, and his father before him. As you know, all he wanted was to be mayor himself." Quesada lifts the latch. "But if he was involved in some forgery scam, we'll find out." He kicks open the door and follows the barrel of his gun into Edu's cortijo. Inside it is dark, and Staffe hesitates. Two flashes light up the interior of Edu's cortijo. He thinks Quesada's pistol has fired twice. The sound is deafening, and Staffe throws himself to the floor, screams as he jolts his bad shoulder. Quesada is breathing heavily, and he fires another single shot, illuminating a body, swinging from the poplar beams above where the dining table used to be. Then the body falls. It slaps the stone floor like a beast in a butcher's back room. Quesada flicks on the light, and Staffe, prostrate on the cold floor, looks Edu in the eye. His face is blue, his eyes are open wide, and his tongue is fat and black.
"You were firing at the rope," says Staffe. "Good shot."
Quesada sits heavily upon a straw-seated chair and sighs.
"How the hell will I account for all this?"
Jesus approaches Pepa, looking over his shoulder. He says,
"They're moving the body in the morning. I don't think we'll get to see it before it goes to Almeria."
"You have to do better than that, Jesus."
Pepa leans into him, whispering,
"I think that body is your primo."
"Manolo?"
She puts an arm around his shoulder, her hand on the V of hair at the nape of his neck.
"We have to find out."
"I don't even know the people at the morgue down here," says Jesus, his voice cracking.
Pepa keeps her hand on his neck.
"You have to try and get us in there."
"I have to make a call first," says Jesus, moving towards the lobby of the Parador.
"What's wrong with your mobile?"
"A landline will be better. I don't want anybody getting their wires crossed."
Pepa doesn't quite understand why he is being so cautious, who it is that he doesn't want to catch the scent. But she's pleased he is gone, and she hastens to his car, intent. When she's done scrutinizing the contents of his glove compartment, she gets the rolled-up rug from the Cinquecento's back seat and waits for him by his car. So far, she has everything she needs. Staffe rubs his shoulder and looks at the Bultaco. Riding it down from Manolo's cortijo to Edu's had been the worst of it, surely. He pops another ibuprofen.
"I wish I could give you a lift, but as you can imagine, I have some paperwork to get into."
Quesada walks to Staffe, slaps him on his good shoulder and wraps his big arms around him, squeezes him tight and says,
"Thank God we can have some peace finally. You have done well, my friend."
Staffe still feels sick and hollow from discovering Manolo, and now Edu. Peace is the wrong word. We can rest once we know who exactly is buried in that wood.
"Sometimes in our job we have to draw a line, call something finished. When will you be back?"
"As soon as I can. I'm going to be an uncle again, don't forget."
"I'll make sure Marie is in good shape. The medico is a good friend. She isn't on her own."
"Thank you," says Staffe, "but there's no need." He wraps his leg over the Bultaco's ruby-red petrol tank.
"Take it easy with our shoulder."
Staffe kicks it into first and looks up. The moon is small tonight, but full.
"Maybe you should go in the morning."
Staffe says nothing.
"What's wrong?"
He thinks about Yusuf and the shanty where he lives. He must get some cash to give to the man with the Chicago Bulls vest. Staffe slowly lets the clutch go, pain firing up his arm. The Bultaco's headlamp lights the trail up for 50 metres or so. He expects the darkness to swallow him up, but the headlamp shows each curve as it sneaks up. Soon Almagen reveals itself. Far away, between the mountains and the sea, Almeria's soft electric glow lights the sky. Chapter 30.
Jesus assures the night porter that he will procure a disability car parking badge for his mother, and the man shows Jesus and Pepper into the tiny morgue which the police use in the basement of the Immaculada Hospital on the eastern fringe of Mojaca. The porter pulls out the stretcher, says, "You can have 2 minutes. They'll be coming soon to take you to Almeria for autopsy." Pepper raises her eyebrows towards Jesus. She mouths the name Sanchez. Jesus says, "Wouldn't this normally go to the morgue in Vera?" The porter shrugs. With her finger and thumb, Pepper pinches the sheet covering the cadaver and slowly pulls it down, revealing the greyed, gaunt face. The soul has long since fluttered away. This is simply the casings of what used to be a life. A breath gusts away from her. She makes sure that her body is between the porter and the corpse, sneaks out her phone, raises it. "You can't do that," hisses Jesus. Pepper clicks the camera. She leans towards the body, scrutinizing, sees there is no piercing to the nose. But even so, she thinks he's a dead ringer for the images she has seen of the Dane, Jens Hansen. She replaces the sheet and thanks the porter. Says, "When they come to take this body, tell them it is a man called Jens Hansen. Tell them he is from Denmark, and if they don't let his parents know, they will burn in hell." She smiles at the porter. "Got it?" The porter smiles back, grateful for the fact that his job has been brightened this one night. He watches the young woman go all the way to the stairs, and he says the name, Jens Hansen, committing it to memory. Staffe leans the Bultaco against the wall of Raoul's building. He looks up at the study, bridging 2 buildings above the alley. Staffe walks backward until he can see the bottom ledge of the mansard window, beneath which he has stashed the package containing Gustav's will. In the moonlight, he can't see if it is still there. To his right, the wall rises sheer, 3 stories. Impossible to scale. To his left, a 2-metre wall seems to give onto a small garden. The wall runs up to Raoul's building, so he wheels the Bultaco to the wall. Here and there, the sounds of dogs and carousing break the stillness. Staffe climbs onto the seat of the Bultaco and then onto the wall. Slowly, he balances, stands upright, and walks gingerly towards Raoul's study. A metre away, his footing slips, and he throws himself forward, reaching at full stretch, grabbing the down pipe that runs down past the window to Raoul's studio. It is metal, and his hand slips, but snags on the lipped joint where the pipe feeds down to the street. His legs swing, night air all around him now and just the flimsiest grip. But he goes with the swing, manages to hook his ankle onto the window ledge. Now, straining to look up, he sees the package he had stashed. His grip on the drainpipe falters, though, and his shoulder feels as if it might pop out again. He can't take the pain, and the drop is 12, 15 feet. With a final effort, he kicks out of the package, dislodges it. His grip gives way, and he tries to right himself mid-air. The package slides down the roof, stops on the guttering. Staffe falls, the street rising fast to meet him, and he grabs at the wall, manages to straighten himself, and his arm scrapes down the render. His feet compact as he hits the ground, and he crumples onto his back. He hears his body slap the cobbles, and he rolls to protect his shoulder. Looking up at the night, he sees the last will of Gustav seeming to flutter, as if it could fly away, whisper its secrets to the wind. Then it falls. It floats to earth, lands on Staffe's chest. The youth in the bull's vest holds an 8-inch chef's knife and has 2 friends with him on the fringe of their shanty. It is the break of dawn,
but they seem set for business. One holds a piece of wood, and the other a metal baseball bat with the tarnished lettering of Louisville Slugger running its length. They form a semicircle and edge towards Staffe 1 pace at a time.
"I am here to repay my debt," says Staffe.
On the way, he stopped at the 24-hour Copo and picked up a prepaid mobile with €50 of credit. He also went to the cash point, took out €1,000 using each of his cash cards. He put 500 up the crack of his arse, just in case it all goes horribly wrong. He tosses the phone, still in its thermosealed and super-sturdy plastic casing. The Bull's youth knows better this time and steps aside, lets the phone drop to the floor.
"Is real,"
shouts the boy with the baseball bat.
He squints at the label. "He's got 50 credit on it."
"You owes me more than that."
"And I've got
more than that," says Staffe, reaching into his right pocket, pulling out 4 €50 notes.
"I'm sorry for what I did the other day, but I had no choice."
"Your honour is worth 200. What kind of a man are you?" Staffe goes in his other pocket, pulls out 5 20s. "There. You've cleaned me out." The Bull's youth tells the other boy to get it, and he scampers up to Staffe, pulls the money from his hands.
"Right," says the Bull's youth. "We soon be even."
He holds the knife out in front of him, and the other two talk nervously in patois French. Staffe tries to engage the Bull's youth, but his eyes are flitting this way and that, and then an almighty thud rings out. The youths look around, and one of them screams, falls to the ground clutching his head. He is bleeding. And Staffe looks all around them, quite slowly, sees Yusuf on a rock above the shanty, twirling a length of leather in the air. He loads another pebble into his slingshot, has the brace of partridge slung over his shoulder.
"Yusuf!"
calls Staffe.
"Stop!"
He picks up the phone and hands it to the Bull's youth, saying, "I'm sorry, I really am." As he hands it to him, he checks out the ruby stud in the youth's ear, says, "I like your jewel. Where'd you get it?" He shrugs. "I'd like to buy it, if I can." He shrugs again, holding out his hand for the other youth to hand across the 300. Yusuf appears at Staffe's side, and he flicks the Bull's youth's ear with his sling. He does it with such deftness that the butterfly grip floats in the air. Staffe goes into his back pocket for 200, says, "Now you really have fleeced me." He holds it out. The Bull's youth smiles and reaches for the money. Staffe makes a fist, concealing the notes. "Tell me where it came from." Yusuf flicks him again, and the Bull's youth's knife twitches. Nothing more. "The dead body?" says Staffe. The youth nods. Staffe unfurls his fist, and the youth takes his loot, hands over the evidence. Staffe is drinking cha in Yusuf's shack when Peppa and Jesus arrive. Yusuf is pleased to see Peppa, who sits cross-legged beside him. He looks at Jesus as if he is the enemy. She wraps both hands around her tea, blowing into the metal cup. "Jesus is helping us. We know what happened now." She nods towards the sea and the plastic greenhouse where the murder took place. Peppa opens an envelope and removes 2 10x8 photographs of the dead man that Yusuf and his young neighbour in the Bull's vest discovered that day a fortnight ago. "This is him?" Jesus says, "Where did you get that?" "That's a police photograph." "It was in your car. I was looking for a lighter," says Peppa. "We agreed to share our information, remember?" She turns to Yusuf. "Is it him? The dead man?" Yusuf nods. Pippa places a finger on one image. The photograph is a close-up of the corpse's face. Horribly bruised, but it is clear from the photograph that the nose is pierced in its left nostril, but unadorned.
There was a ruby here.
This ruby, says Staffe, holding out the gem the bull's youth had been wearing. Yusuf nods again, his mouth sad, his eyes inquiring. She says,
This man is called Agustin Cano.
No, says Jesus, you can't tell who it is. Look at the state of him.
Why did they kill him? Says the youth in the bull's vest.
You're better off not knowing, says Staffe.
You shouldn't have those photographs, says Jesus. Surely you would have been able to see it was Agustin. Why didn't you tell me?
Jesus says, I didn't know what I was dealing with, and that's the truth. Pepper says to Yusuf,
Will you be all right?
He's going home, says the bull's youth.
You must travel safely.
He has money, he has thousands. Me, I'm going to America. That's the next stop for me. The bull's youth taps his chest with a clenched fist on the O of Chicago.
Peppa says to Yusuf, Is there anything you need?
He shakes his head, clasps her hands, and slowly bows his head.
He going tomorrow. In a week he will be with his family again, says the bull's youth.
Why did they cut his tongue? Says Peppa.
He talked too much, I guess. Most times it's better to say nothing, at least in our world.
Staffe travels with Peppa and Jesus back into the city, mindful that they have the Barrington. Jesus would have to work until he was 100 to earn what the painting might fetch. A few hundred metres from the plastic, they pass the El Morisco restaurant. The Maître d' is out front, smoking, chatting to a fisherman who shows his catch from a styrofoam container on the back of his pickup. As they drive by, the Maître d' raises his hand, calls, "Jesus!" But Jesus ignores him. Staffe turns to Jesus, says, "There's more bad news."
How can there be? Says Jesus.
"What are you talking about?" says Peppa.
Last night, Manolo.
"No!" says Jesus. "He was killed in his cortijo." Jesus doesn't cry or wail or even sniffle. Within a couple of minutes he drives on, his jaw set. "So, who killed Agustin and Manolo too? Do you have answers?" "What would you say?" says Staffe. "This is your jurisdiction after all." "I am in the dark, I really am," says Jesus. The Cano family has been decimated. Now only poor Rubio is left alive. We know it stems from an association with Barrington. Jesus says to Staffe, "Manolo clearly involved you, right? He drew you in." Staffe says, "It begins in the plastic, and you're right. Manolo took me to the Quintatoro. If I hadn't gone there, I wouldn't have found you and then Raoul, and he wouldn't have come up to Almagen."
"Raoul was already looking upon you as a story," says Peppa.
"Santi esta batteria," says Staffe.
"Just tell me. Who do you think killed Agustin?" says Jesus.
"Manolo," says Staffe.
"What?"
"Agustin went back to Germany and Manolo's future was bright. He had a scholarship to study in Granada, but he couldn't go. Agustin dropped out, just hanging around for his inheritance. But he came back, and he discovered Astrid was having an affair with Jackson Roberts, and maybe he was thinking ahead to his inheritance.
Rubio was emasculated by it all, and it's quite possible that he killed Astrid and ran. The others buried her the way they might have in the war to cover it up, because they were worried about the art scam they had going. But then Rubio went mad and he was institutionalized. Or they put him there to protect him. And themselves, says Pepper. Whatever the reasons, Manolo felt his life was destroyed. He stayed to tend the goats and the family tradition. And Agustin left to be a free spirit, travelling the world, supported by his grandparents, says Pepper. Staffe says Agustin came back this time because his grandfather had died. It was time to make sure he got the inheritance. Manolo wouldn't kill for money, though, says Jesus. If Agustin was back because of the money, that would have riled him. But why would Manolo leave the body like that? Why would he kill his brother in such a fashion? He wanted the death to speak volumes. So he made sure that Raúl Gutierrez was running the story, and he pulled my strings too. He knew I'd be inquisitive. And he knew about my past. That was enough to get Raúl interested. He wanted you and Raúl to uncover the past, says Pepper. So he led you to the body in the woods too. It's only a theory. Staffe turns to Jesus. How did you come to be on call the day the body was found? It was the holidays, as you know. Sanchez called in from Palma de Mallorca. He was golfing over there, and he made sure the body was held here. I had as good a chance of being pulled out here as anybody, I suppose. I'm junior, so I don't get the big holidays off. I was on call. Your family. I don't believe in coincidences. If he knew what had happened and he wanted it covered up, wouldn't he arrange for you to be stationed down there? And you did cover it up. Jesus says, believe me, I didn't know what was happening. But why would Sanchez want to cover it up? He left Almagen in a hurry. I checked, says Pepper. He left just a month after Barrington died. Staffe says, well, that makes sense. But what about Raúl? Says Pepper. Surely Manolo wouldn't have killed him. He wanted Agustin's body to make a trail that led to Astrid's murder. Exactly. And Raúl was making that trail. Of course Manolo wouldn't want Raúl to be stopped. Technically, Raúl died by misadventure. There's no evidence he was murdered, says Jesus. He was dead before he went into that barranco. We all know that, says Staffe. What about Edu? Says Jesus. It was Edu who killed Manolo, says Staffe. Manolo wrote his name in blood just before he died. Then Edu killed himself, says Pepper. It's neat, says Staffe. Edu did everything he could to preserve the honour of his family, and maybe he knew about the scam, passing Jackson's paintings off as Barrington's. He knew we were onto him, and he couldn't bear any more shame. Unless we're missing something, continues Staffe. In articulating his theory, Staffe comes to doubt it. In his heart, he doesn't believe Manolo could kill a man, and he knows there's only so many who could have killed Agustin. It's a good theory, says Jesus. A damn good theory, provided you believe Edu was at his tether's end, that he had to do something to stop the world discovering what he had been involved with. Pepper says, and there's the money, of course. They must have a fortune. The last Barrington went for $1 million. Imagine if there were other Barringtons. Big money. And Raúl was onto them. Sanchez knew about that, hence the cover-up, says Staffe. So Edu was wrapped up in all that art forgery. Who'd have thought that, says Pepper. Simple paintings leading to all that bloodshed. Not paintings, money, says Jesus. I like to think it's all about honour, says Staffe.
feeling Gustav's untranslated will stuffed down his shirt, wondering what Gustav Hesse did for his final spin of the wheel. "And love," says Pepper. "Of course. If Manolo hadn't loved his mother so, he would never have taken such revenge on Agustin," says Jesus. Pepper takes a moment. "Is that the only love he ever knew?" Jesus says, "He always had a thing for that gypsy girl. They called her Brujita." "The little witch," says Pepper. "Consuela," says Staffe. Poor Manolo. He must have hated Agustin for almost all his life. Well, that's only my theory. Staffe thinks about the Manolo he thought he knew, and he thinks about Manolo's father, still living and breathing through it all. The phone bleeps, and Staffe sees Quesada light up his screen. The text appears, and he says, "I have to go back." Jesus says, "Relax, you have got to the bottom of it all. We have to celebrate." "The baby is coming," says Staffe. Chapter 31. Yusuf sits cross-legged under a lemon tree watching the man come towards him. At his back, the ferry for Morocco prepares for boarding. The man reaches out, hands Yusuf the ticket, then lights up a spliff, offers it to Yusuf. He declines, and Jackson Roberts inhales deeply before going into his pocket, giving him the final 1,000 euros, saying, "You're doing the right thing. This country's not for you. Everyone needs a home. You know, I love this country. I love it like a woman you can't trust or understand, and sure as the devil pisses hell fire, she's going to cheat on you, but you love her anyway. They say you can't change your homeland, but hey, fuck 'em." He draws long, hard on the spliff, dragging it all the way down to its roach. His eyes glaze, and for all the world he seems empty, unrequited. On the road between Almagen and Messina, a large truck is parked up on the crown of the bend. The grass verge is broad here and shaded by eucalyptus. Two shaven-headed men perch on the tailgate, drinking from mugs and unmistakably English. Patricia Harbinson offers the men buttered slices of malt loaf, and her husband walks down the track from their cortijo, holding a cardboard box. He calls, "That's the last of it." Each of the Harbinsons is smiling. Their eyes are bright and their skin seems to sing in the dappled light. "You lost the court case," says Staffe. "No," says Patricia Harbinson. "The oaths made us legal. They said we can stay." She laughs. "But it looks as if you're going," says Staffe. "We missed the point," says Terry Harbinson, crossing the road and setting the box down between the two men on the tailgate. "When you're in a fight, you don't always know what you're fighting for." "At least the house is legal now. We can sell it." "But you're going back to England," says Staffe. "They don't want us here," says Patricia. For an instant she looks sad. Then she smiles. "Of course they don't," says Terry. "Whatever made us think they might?" He takes the mugs from the men and empties the dregs over the verge into the campo, where the fig trees run down to the almonds. In the bottom of the valley, oranges flourish, and olive trees too. "Come on, let's be off." Marie screams. She is laid out on Staffe's bed, and she shouts at Paolo that he is a bastard, and that if she ever gets out of this alive, she will rip off his nuts and pound them to pulp, if he ever... Staffe holds Harry close. and the nephew clings onto his leg tightly. Keeps saying, "Will she be all right? Don't let her die." "You should go downstairs, Harry. Keep Gracia company. I'll get you when it's done." "No!" The nurse's expression changes, and she gets busy. Consuela is here, and she dabs Marie's forehead. A breeze ruffles the room. It comes all the way from the sea and in through the branches of the walnut tree. The nurse sinks to her knees, and Marie grabs Consuela's arm, screams, "Sweet Jesus!" The room falls quiet. Harry gasps, lets go of his uncle's leg. In the corner of the room, Paolo has his head in his hands, rocking manically back and forth, muttering some kind of mantra. Consuela says, "It is coming, Marie." The nurse says, it is here, now push." "I am," shouts Marie. "Push! Marie's word expires, and the room is dead quiet. For 1, 2, 3 seconds, you could snap the silence over your knee like a seasoned olive branch. Marie exhales a long, loud sigh. The sigh cracks, becomes a groan. Everyone in the room looks at her, wide-eyed, holding their breath. She grunts. Then she sighs, long and easy. The nurse stands. In one expert hand, she holds a pink, blood-spattered baby, still wired to its mother by a bloody cord. The nurse tips the baby, fast as flash, and she taps its bottom with the back of her fingers. The baby, which Staffe sees as a girl, screams blue murder, and everybody laughs. Marie reaches for her daughter. Holding her tight, she looks at Staffe and says, "We're calling her Enid." Enid, their mother's name. Quesada pours cava into Staffe's glass. They clink their glasses at the counter while Salva looks on, smiling. The old goats come up to Staffe and congratulate him on the birth of his new niece, and when Frog comes in, he makes his way through the crowd, says to Staffe, "You've done well." "Well, it wasn't me. It's Marie who had the baby," he laughs. "I mean helping to catch up with those killers. I knew all along it had nothing to do with the war. Nothing like that went on in Almagen. I knew it. So I thank you for showing the truth." Let's hope it can stand up in court. Quesada says, "We'll make sure it does." "Well, the bastards can't wriggle off the hook, can they? They're all dead," says Frog. "Come on, have a drink." Quesada hands Frog a glass and pours, then recharges Staffe's glass. "Will you stay?" asks the Frog. "Stay?" "Here in Almagen." Frog downs his cava in one go, and the bubbles make him splutter. "The Moors came, and then the Asturians came, and then the foreigners came. They brought trouble with them, but you're the kind we need. So, will you stay?" "I think I will." Frog holds out his glass to be filled again, and he tells Staffe and Quesada about how he knew all along that there was something wrong with Manolo and Edu. As he speculates as to who might inherit Manolo's flock, and what will become of Edu's cortijo, and more importantly his bean crop, Staffe's mind wanders. He is tired and sore. Tomorrow he will sleep the whole day, and he will think about maybe getting a bigger place. He dwells upon the observation Frog made. How difficult it will be to gather evidence. Witnesses are dead. The perpetrators are dead. Rubio is inadmissible. But that's not his problem. Quesada takes a hold of Staffe's elbow and leans close, talking into his ear. "I couldn't say in front of everyone, but we had news." "News?" "They found a red butaco this morning. It was in a ravine on the other side of the Sierra Montar."
Jackson Roberts. He made it over the top, but copped it coming down the other side. A fitting end, says Staffe, feeling a tug at his shirt. He looks down at Harry's beaming face looking up at him. At his side is Gracia.
Mummy wants ice cream.
I'll get it.
You don't know what she wants.
Raspberry, says Staffe, crouching. There's plenty I know about your mum.
And one for you and Gracia too?
The children nod, and Staffe gives Harry €5, watches him lead Gracia into the Commodore to the ice cream fridge. They chatter about the pros and cons of each make of ice cream and look like an old couple. It makes him think what the dead must have looked like as children, choosing their ice cream. Manolo and Agustin, Edu and Raoul, Astrid, and now Jackson Roberts, so far from home. When Harry tries to pay, Salva refuses to take his money, and Harry and Gracia run into the Plazetta. The sun shines bright, and they paddle water from the fountain onto the mules and sing to the sky as they go. Staffe takes out Gustav's will, not really wanting to know what it says, but wanting to know why Raoul had a copy, and why someone took it from Manolo's chest. He will have it translated into something less foreign. Part 5. Chapter 32. "Why didn't you tell me about Jasmine Cash?" says DCI Pennington. Josie Chancellor's stomach slowly churns. She doesn't know what is coming, but can tell it is bad. "What about Jasmine Cash?" "She's never had so much as a sniff of a charge sheet. She's as clean as you and me, yet Pulford has been harassing her every night for months. And now she has reported it." Well, she's obviously very upset. Pennington looks warily at his constable. "Janus Golding had a phone. We've had it analysed, and the night he died, he called D.S. Pulford." "Oh, no," says Josie, fearing the worst for Pulford. "He's going to need all the help he can get, Chancellor. Do you understand what I'm saying?"
Yes, sir."
"I've been calling Staffe, but there's no answer from his damn phone. Have you spoken to him at all?" Josie shakes her head, feels doubly sad. "You look done in. I think you should take a few days off. Maybe you need to get away." Marie has returned to El Nido with baby Enid, who is fit and strong with a shock of black hair that comes straight from Paolo. Staffe is standing amongst piles of boxes on the floor of his studio, finally stacking his books onto the shelves now he is here to stay. He comes across his battered copy of Martin Amos's Money and leafs through it to see if the old dollar bill from his first trip to New York is still there. And it is. Seeing it reminds him of when he had to pack his father's books away. After he was murdered, he and Marie decided to take them to the Oxfam shop on Isha High Street. In packing, he had checked his father's Folio Society edition of the Gold Rush. Tucked into its protective case were 20 £50 notes. His father would talk about grand nights, said you should always have a grand put by, to blow, and he kept it in the Gold Rush. Now Staffe thinks about what will become of Manolo's books. "Will?" The call is from the street, and followed by the fast patter of feet up the stairs. Harry appears just seconds later, panting. "Can I stay over? Consuela's asked if I want to have supper with them, and I can sleep over, but you need to ask my mum." "Are you sure you want him overnight?" Staffe looks past Harry to Consuela, who appears on the stairs, looking coy. "Come in, sit down. I'm just unpacking." "I'm sure," says Consuela, looking at the books. Manolo liked to read. I'll call your mother, says Staffe, and Harry and Gracia run downstairs. Staffe says to Consuela, sit down, please. I should go. Manolo was fond of you, wasn't he? Consuela shakes her head. Do you think I should take his books to Rubio? I would like some for Gracia, as she grows up. Staffe recalls the photograph he found of Gracia in the same chest as Gustav's will, the will that had been removed by someone, and which had earlier been copied and given to Raoul. I'm going to his house. Consuela leaves, her head bowed. On his way out, Staffe picks up Gustav's will, duly translated, which states that the fruits of all Gustav's labours would pass not to his daughter, and thereafter to her sons, but to the people of Alfonduja, a village on the border between Morocco and Mauritania. It is a place he had come to love, a place where he had built a school, but where there was much, much more to do in terms of medical and water provision. Clearly, anybody aware of that will would know nothing would flow to Manolo and Agustin. By the time Staffe has walked through the Plazeta, Consuela is standing by Manolo's front door. She says, I have a key. I cleaned for him. Staffe follows her into the house and smiles as he watches Consuela trail her finger along the spines of the books. He suspects she cannot read. Consuela says, Manolo couldn't kill anyone, and especially not his brother. No matter how much he hated Agustin, he wouldn't harm a hair on him. She looks at the shotgun, propped up against the fireplace. It was all he could do to shoot a partridge. Staffe picks up the gun. He feels a memory return, something vague, unformed. Manolo is Gracia's father, isn't he? I wouldn't let him marry me. I was a fool. You didn't love him. I should have. For Gracia. Staffe raises the shotgun. You did the right thing. He nestles the stock into his right shoulder, but it doesn't quite fit. Manolo's last act was to write Edu's name in blood. He did it on the floor, to the right of where he lay, face down, blood stained on the index finger of his right hand. Staffe is right-handed. He switches the gun stock to his left shoulder, and rather than put his right index finger on the trigger, he runs it along the barrel. The stock fits perfectly to his left shoulder. He says, Manolo was left-handed, putting the index finger of his left hand to the trigger. So is Gracia, says Consuela. Did he ever talk to you about if he died? Why would he? He would want Gracia to be looked after. I'll look after her. Staffe thinks of his own father, looks at each spine on each shelf. He picks off Love in the Time of Cholera and looks inside. Nothing. He tries The Trial and comes up empty. Then he tries Remembrance of Things Past. It is an English translation which strikes him as being somehow out of place. He stands back from the bookshelves, looking not at the titles, but for something which might stick out, anything not ordinary about a bookshelf. He lets his eye be drawn, then return. Drawn again, this time to a foreign cipher. Did Manolo speak German? Consuela crinkles her eyebrows. I heard him talk to a tourist once, but they were English, I think. I'm sure of it. She laughs. He wore black socks with shorts. They were English, all right. Staffe takes down the volume of Siddhartha. It is in German and published by Suhrkamp. He carefully opens Hermann Hesse's novel.
It is a first edition, and the frontispiece is signed, "For my wonderful grandson, from Hermann." Beneath, a different hand has written, "And mine also, from Gustav." Staffe opens his hands, the way in which a priest might hold something holy. The pages fall open, reveal a loose leaf. Staffe reads it quickly, tells Consuela it is nothing, and carefully pockets the last will and testament of Gustav Hesse. Except it is not the last. It is a prior version to the one which he had found in Raoul's study and which he had translated. In this document, secreted by Manolo, all his worldly wealth is left to his grandsons, Manolo and Agustin. With the will in his pocket, against his heart, Staffe feels the full force of the loss of his friend, Manolo, an utterly decent and proper man. He says, "How did Manolo and Agustin get on?" "He never spoke of Agustin." "But Agustin was here a few weeks ago." Consuela shakes her head. She sits down on the edge of a chair and her shoulders shake. "He couldn't hurt him. I can assure you of that." "I know Manolo didn't kill Agustin." Staffe kneels in front of Consuela. "But you said he did. That's what Quesada and the Guardia have been saying." He takes her gently by the shoulders and says softly, "But I have to know the truth, to get to the truth." Consuela nods. "Agustin and Manolo had an argument. A terrible, terrible argument. They said such awful things to each other." "What did they say?" "I was upstairs cleaning. I didn't hear it all, but Manolo said Agustin couldn't love anybody. He said he was only interested in money." "And Agustin?" "He said he had seen things Manolo hadn't, that they were so different they didn't even have the same blood. He said he was going to dig up the past and prove it to the world. I remember it exactly. It made my blood cold. I knew something terrible would happen." "And what did Manolo say?" "He said Agustin was only saying it for the money. And then he said the strangest thing." "What?" "Manolo told Agustin that he loved him." It went quiet, and I think they must have embraced. I came to the top of the stairs." She looks up over her shoulder. "And Manolo said, 'Leave the past alone. They will kill you to keep it the way it is.' And then Agustin left. I never saw him again." Staffe follows Consuela out of Manolo's house, sees Quesada's Guardia Civil Land Rover outside Barfuente. As Consuela walks off through the Plazetta to find Harry and Gracia, he goes in the bar, where Quesada is in the Commodore in a cloud of cigar smoke. But it smells richer today. Comisario Sanchez is opposite Quesada, pulling on his cohiba. 2 black and gold bands sit on the table. Quesada looks glum, but forces a smile when Staffe sits down with them. "This is like a police canteen," says Staffe. "More like the United Nations," says Quesada. He nods at Sanchez. "And we have good news." "I got Cortez to run full tests on the body from the woods," says Sanchez. "It's no ghost from the war." "What made you change your mind?" says Staffe. "It's an old man, between 70 and 80 years old," says Sanchez. "A man? Did he run the DNA test?" Sanchez shakes his head. "It's not Astrid Cano. You'll have to abandon that theory and look elsewhere for her body, if there is a body. Her father died and she didn't go to the funeral. Explain that."
She's in some hippie commune somewhere. Maybe she doesn't know about Gustav Hesse passing away. What does it matter? We can prove Edu killed Manolo, says Quesada. And Manolo must have killed Agustin, like you say. Staffe says nothing. He thinks about the poor Dane and Raoul. He knows what Sanchez and Quesada would say. A junkie tied up in something he didn't understand, and a drunk driver. Cases closed. He says, "Who is the man up in the woods?" "We don't know," says Quesada, "but we are investigating naturally." Sanchez says to Quesada, "Perhaps you could leave us for a minute or two?" The brigadier jumps too, picking up his cigar, popping on his cap. Sanchez watches him all the way out of the bar, says to Staffe, "I can see that there's something on your mind." "I know Jens Hansen was killed in Mojaca, not down in the plastic. And I know why he was killed. To provide a false ID for Agustin Cano's corpse. And I can see that you can construct a plausible motive for Manolo killing his brother. And there is evidence for Manolo being killed by Edu, who needed to keep his name out of any investigations into the painting scam. You seem to know plenty." "Know is the wrong word. I understand those theories." "So what is your problem?" "Who is buried up in my sister's woods? Where is Astrid Cano? And how did Santi Estebatteria come to fit into this story, Commissario?" "I don't think everything needs to fit all the time, do you? If it did, we'd be left with nothing to do." "Did you know Raul Gutierrez was looking into Estebatteria?" "That is a question for another time, I'm afraid. You know about the peace with ETA. If you ask me, Raul had his own story in mind and Estebatteria was only ever a device. It's time you dropped it." Sanchez regards his cigar. "Understand?" "I understand what you are saying." "They tell me you have decided to stay on here in Almagen." "I must apply myself to being a doubly good uncle now. And there is so much to discover in this country of yours." "What exactly is there to discover?" "For my first bullfight, for example." "The Almeria Feria is the place to go. There's a corrida every day for a week. Tomorrow it's Tomas. He is the best, and one of our own." "Tickets are an impossibility, they say." "Nothing is impossible," says Sanchez. "Maybe we could help each other." "How?" "Tell me why you are really staying on." "There are more murders here." "Astrid Cano." "And Raul Gutierrez." "And the dead have to speak." "Exactly," says Staffe. He tries to evaluate the Commissario, but Sanchez's eyes are soft and unfocused. His breathing is even. "You should definitely go to a corrida. Give me your number and I'll try to fix you up with some tickets." Staffe scribbles his number on a paper serviette. As he hands it to Sanchez, it feels like a mistake. The key swings down from the azotea, and Staffe has to jump out of the way, but even so it still catches him on the side of the head. He could swear that he hears Immaculada chuckle to herself as he lets himself in. He climbs the dark, dank stairwell, up into the fragrance and light of the top floor. She is dressed in a black Mao tunic and loose black linen trousers. Her thick grey hair is scooped up in a lavish bun. Her eyes are bright, but her skin is loose and grey. Immaculada says, "This had better be good." "It's very kind of you to see me. I was a friend of Edu's."
All my life my brother was ashamed of me, and now it's my turn to be ashamed of him. The pity I don't give a damn. I'm sorry you couldn't make it to the funeral. He killed a good man, why would I? Nothing has been proven. Ah, that will take years. It will see me out. Now, why are you here? Immaculada coughs, raises a handkerchief to her mouth. Her eyes water. The young journalist assured me I would be pleased with the outcome. Staffe holds out the rolled-up rug. Oh, you've not come selling me rugs, have you? I had enough of that in damn Tangier. Barrington took you to Tangier. Only once. Just the two of you? The German woman came, but I didn't let you in to talk about her. Staffe sinks to his knees, carefully unrolling the rug. The canvas is protected by tissue and is further sandwiched by 2 thick sheets of cartridge paper. Staffe slowly reveals the image and stands, takes a step back, saying, We have called it La Sonata. After the song. That's right. It's a good painting. Maybe his finest? His? It might have Hugo's signature, but this isn't his. You're here under false pretenses. His later works, take it away. But they say it's worth a fortune. It's worth nothing to me. Do you know who painted this? There's nothing of Hugo in that painting. Can't you see? Hugo was loose. This brushwork is stiff, too controlled. Staffe kneels in front of her, meticulously rolls the painting back up, and wraps the rug around it. I like the rug, though, says Immaculada. Did you buy rugs in Tangier? We have our own rugs here in the Alpujarras, but the rest of them did. Astrid and Jackson. She nods. Ah, was Rubio there? Yes, and his primo, that fellow with the bar down in Almeria. Angel, who has the Quintatoro. That's him. Thick as thieves, him and Rubio. More like brothers than cousins. Did Angel ever come up here? All the time. Sundays and Mondays, as I recall, when he didn't open his bar. He'd be shooting partridge up at his cortijo. He has a cortijo up here. Next to his primos. You mean Rubio, says Staffe. They built it together. And when did he stop coming? A long time ago. Immaculada's brow ruffles. Around the time Hugo passed away. I don't know. Maybe, yes. Yes, it would have been around then. Was that when Astrid went missing? I said I don't want to talk about her, if you don't mind. Staffe tucks the rolled rug under his arm. You know, I spoke to Edu just a couple of days before he passed away. Passed away? He was murdered. He took his own life. He hanged himself. Huh? I can assure you he didn't. He wouldn't dare. Dare? It would condemn him to an eternity of damnation. That's what he believed. It's the only thing we have in common, our belief in the church. Is that why he carried Hugo's coffin? Immaculada looks puzzled, as if trying to resurrect a distant memory. He did that for you, didn't he? Was it his way of saying sorry for the way he was with Hugo? I don't know where you get your nonsense from. I didn't want him there, but Edu insisted. And he was well in with the priest. I didn't want to make a scene, But if I'd had my way, my brother would have been banished from the village for the funeral. You're sure? Edu insisted on being there, insisted on carrying the coffin. That's right. I saw a photograph. There was Jackson Roberts and Rubio, and Edu bearing Hugo's coffin. I wouldn't have had any of them there. But Hugo was his own man, and I was ill with it all, so I let them do what they wanted. And the fourth man? Immaculada frowns. Oh, you should know. You've been talking about him. Angel. What a bunch of rogues, she laughs. But that's probably what Hugo would have wanted, to plant him for the next life. Staffe says goodbye to Immaculada, asks if he can use the bathroom on his way out. He runs the tap, and in a handcrafted medicine cabinet built into a nook in the thick wall, he finds an ivory-backed pair of gentleman's brushes, picks out a handful of hair, Hugo's hair. He places it carefully in the empty stamp pocket of his wallet, something for Cortes to identify. Staffe pulls off the carretera onto a verge just beyond the Seven-Eye Bridge and above Orchiva. Down below, on the banks of the river, smoke rises from a teepee village, which is scattered like litter with tents and benders, caravans and transits. Today they're holding a memorial service for Jackson Roberts, but it won't be in the twin-towered church. A circle of people have formed on the dusty meadow beside the river. They are holding hands. A guitar strums and someone gets on the bongos. Slowly a melody forms, and a woman's voice emerges singing Blowing in the Wind. Staffe looks all around to see if anybody else is paying respects from a distance, but it appears not. Guadalupe has not come. He hoped she might, but he waits a while, watching the hippies pay their respects, managing to enjoy themselves a little along the way. The smell of hashish drifts on the breeze, and within an hour the dancing begins. It's probably what Jackson would want. He telephones Peppa, asks her to get a message to Guadalupe, to come and collect what he has for her. And he drives away, checking that the last Barrington is safely rolled up in its Moroccan rug.
End of Disc 8. Disc 9.
Chapter 33. The maître d' shows Staffe to a table out front, beneath El Marisco's bamboo canopy. The sea is across the road, and the plastic greenhouses are to the right, with the small shanty where Yusuf had fashioned his makeshift home just beyond. Guadalupe arrives in a newish hatchback, and the maître d' receives her as if she is not unfamiliar. As they are in conversation, he scans the road, but the road is empty. Today, and all this week, the great and the good, and the bad, are in Almeria for the feria. Staff's room at the Hotel Catedral cost double for tonight. It seems so long since he was first there. "You found it all right," says Staffe, as Guadalupe takes her seat. She smells fine, of jasmine, and her hair is up and done. "I've been before." "I popped into Jackson's service in Orchiva yesterday. I thought you might have been there." "Not my scene, really. I heard it was going to be a hippie affair." "And your Uncle Edu's funeral?" "I can't shed tears for that one, I'm afraid. I don't know what that makes me." "I saw your mother yesterday." "She said." "You've seen her?" "Of course. I was passing." "Did she tell you about La Serenata?" "Is that what you're calling it?" She looks around to see if he has brought it. The young journalist had said he would. "Your mother was sceptical as to its provenance. She has a very romantic notion of my father, You really shouldn't have shown it to her. Guadalupe picks up the menu, looks down in a cursory way, saying, "The red shrimp is the thing to have. I fancy the turbot." Staffe thinks of the times he has had turbot. It takes him back, not to a world of lapping sea or fishing villages, but to the wood-panelled world of the George and Vulture, the long city lunches he and Jessup would share when a case was dragged to its conclusion. "Yes, the turbot for me." "Is this your treat?" "Maybe it could be yours. Let's call it a finder's fee." Guadalupe looks anxious for an instant, quickly corrects herself. "For what?" "The last Barrington." "Is there such a thing?" He takes out his phone, clicks through the commands. "If there is, it should be yours, wouldn't you say? If your mother doesn't want it." He turns his phone towards her so she can see the screen. On it, an image of La Sonata. "You really have it?" "In my hotel room." "If I'm buying lunch, I need more than a photograph." She laughs. "This could be a couple of €100. They have some wonderful Ribera del Duero here, too." "In that case, I definitely need more than a photograph. I have to go straight to the bullfight after this. Here." He shows her his keycard for the Hotel Cathédrale. "Room 7. "Are you sure?" He nods, reaching further with his hand, proffering the key. It's rolled up in a rug. "I can assure you, no matter what you might think, this will be staying in the family. It means more than money." The maître d' personally comes to take their order. He gives Staffe a suspicious look. Guadalupe says, "I'll have the red shrimp, and my friend will have the turbot, and a bottle of your Ribera." When the wine comes, Staffe toasts Jackson Roberts, and they clink. "You'll miss him. Good neighbours are hard to find." "The fool! Fancy going over the sea a montard on a bike." "You know, I suppose in a way it's good that he went like that. He used to say that once you've seen war, every peaceful day starts with a present being unwrapped." He unwrapped plenty of presents, is my guess. The maître d' sidles up, recharges their glasses, and a red Bultaco rattles by, struggling under the weight of 2 Moroccans, one of them the Bull's youth. They are finishing off the figs and Manchego cheese, and Staffe tries to stop Guadalupe from paying, but she insists. And as she settles the bill with the maître d', he goes inside, feeling their eyes on him all the way. So he closes the door behind him. Through the frosted glass he watches their outlines. He calls the bartender across, says, "Has my friend Jesus been in?" He takes out a €20 note, places it on the bar. "Jesus of the Cuerpo." "Do you want a drink?" The bartender speaks perfect Spanish, but with a Romanian accent. 2 coffees. "He comes here often. Was he here the night they found the body across the road?" The bartender looks at the 20 with a certain disdain. "The Cuerpo. They give good custom." Staffe removes the 20, replaces it with a 50. "This is the last time you'll see me, and I'll never talk. He was here that night, wasn't he?" The bartender checks behind him. "Not for long, and not with police." Staffe slides the note across, and the bartender pockets it, deft as a thief, and slides it down the waistband of his apron. "Was there a fair man with them?" "He had a stud in his nose, a ruby stud." The bartender nods, looking past Staffe towards the door. "There was an American with them?" "A loudmouth." The bartender looks towards the door. "They drank plenty, that's for sure." And did it get lively? A good job they were outside, round the corner. Was there a man called Edu with them, an older guy? The bartender shakes his head. Or a shepherd, a big fellow called Manolo? The bartender shakes his head again. There was just the 4 of them. 4. But Jesus left early, almost straight away and before they started eating. Who was the 4th? The guy from the Quinta Toro, Jesus' father. The bartender looks past Staffe as the door opens and the maître d' comes in. He turns towards the coffee machine, says, I'll bring your drinks out. Guadalupe is all set to go when he returns. Handbag on her shoulder and sunglasses pulled down. She hasn't touched her pacharan. She says, I'll follow you to the hotel. I ordered coffee. Staffe takes out his ticket for the corrida. Says, I have to go straight to the Plaza de Toros. Guadalupe scrutinizes the ticket. You're in the sun. Get yourself a hat. She holds onto the ticket long enough to clock precisely where he will be sitting, then hands it back. He says, Don't forget, it's room 7, and keep your hands off the minibar. She laughs. The sun catches her hair, and he glimpses a throwback to what Barrington might have seen in the young Immaculada. Mother said you were quite a gentleman. She's a good judge. Guadalupe kisses him on each cheek, says, If I can get a room, maybe we could take a walk down to the feria after your fight. You should give me your number. He tells her the number, and they leave as the bartender brings the coffees. Like a gentleman, he lets the lady go first, and as she does, he pockets the bill, slips it into his trouser pocket unseen. He thinks of that last supper for Agustin, with Jackson and Angel, and Jesus, briefly. And he thinks, too, of the men who carried Barrington, half dead, half alive. Peppa is dressed to the nines in her red polka-dot dress with a tight bodice and a halter neck. It flares out like 1950s America, and her lips and nails are painted to match. On the table in front of her is a box, tied with ribbon and filled, no doubt, with rich fancies. "Have you missed me?" says Staffe. "Of course, but I'm not complaining." She looks out of the window at the Hotel Catedral. "So, Guadalupe's in there." "I gave her my room key." "Can you trust her with the Barrington?" "If it's worth anything, then she's entitled to it. And if we're right, then it's worthless. What is there to lose?" "If you're right." "And if I'm right, you'll have the story of a lifetime." Peppa falls silent. Her eyebrows pinch, and after a minute or so she says, "If you're right, there'll be a few rich collectors a little less rich." "An influential lot," says Staffe. "And Jackson really will be glad he's dead." Staffe thinks about this, and again they sit in silence. "Should we call him?" says Peppa. "We better had. I'm late for the bullfight already." Peppa blows out her cheeks. "I don't like this one bit, you know." "I see you have your cakes," says Staffe, pointing to the ribbon box. "Did you speak to the bartender in El Marisco?" Jackson was there the night they killed Agustin, and so were Angel and Jesus. "But no Edo or Manolo?" He shakes his head, keeps a sharp eye on the entrance to the Hotel Catedral. The street cleaners are hosing down the plaza after the mayhem of the feria. By day, Almeria heaves with revellers, drinking sherry by the bottle at chiringuitos, and dancing to mariachis and brass bands. Then, at 4, a whistle is blown, and everybody sleeps. Until 6. Then they slowly reappear. Staffe's heart beats ahead of itself, and he can't keep his fingers and feet still. He calls for some beer.
"He's on his way," says Pepper, clicking off her phone. "What if they both come at once? You don't think we should go to the police?"
"Which police? He is police."
"But if he's here when Guadalupe comes out of the hotel, what do we do?"
"You follow her," says Staffe.
"Shouldn't you?"
"Well, I can't allow you to be left on your own with Jesus."
"But what if she leads us to him? Would you wish that on me?"
Staffe's head spins. He feels woozy.
"And what if she doesn't come out? She might be totally on the level."
"I know."
"You know what?"
says Jesus, who has stolen in. He sidles in between Staffe and Pepper. He's out of uniform, but in the heat he still wears a jacket. Summer, in Almeria, only old men wear a jacket, unless, perhaps, you wanted to cover up what the Americans call heat.
"My ticket," says Staffe, "is in the sun."
"You're going to the corrida," says Jesus. "What section?" Looking Jesus in the eye, Staffe sees innocence and youth, but feels his stomach clench. Despite the fact he can't trust Jesus, he tells him precisely where he will be sitting for the corrida. K section.
"You will fry like a gamba," he laughs.
"Don't talk to me about gambas," says Staffe. He reaches into his trouser pocket, pulls out the bill for El Marisco, and tosses it onto the table in front of Jesus. 65 euros for a plate of red shrimp. Jesus checks out the date on the bill, says, "You went today." His mouth hangs open. Then he smiles. "But they are Almeria red, the best in all the world." "At least I didn't pay. And the service on top. The service is so good. I've only been once before, but they remembered me. They remember everything, it seems." Jesus' smile evaporates. He stares at the bill.
"I have to go," says Pepper.
"But you called me," says Jesus. "I thought we were going out." Pepper sees Guadalupe walking quickly across the plaza, skipping out of the way of the street cleaners with their hoses, a rolled rug under her arm. Pepper stands, kisses Jesus rapidly on either cheek. Behind his back, she makes a telephone shape with her finger and thumb to Staffe. Once outside, she breaks into a trot, clutching her polka-dot skirt, and the cake box swinging as she goes. She catches up to Guadalupe in the Plaza Porcena. It is easy enough to keep tabs from a distance because the streets are quiet. But as Guadalupe turns up Calle Granada, and Pepper follows, the streets become busier and busier. Close to the Plaza de Toros, the cafes and bars are full, and people queue outside the cake shops and tobacconists. As they turn left up Avenida Vilches, the street is full of families standing in large groups and old-timers getting together. Guadalupe moves smoothly through the crowd, and Pepper keeps losing sight of her, having to break into a trot whenever she gets space, brushing past women handing out cakes and street vendors selling seat cushions the colours of the flag.
"Pepper!"
She feels someone grab her arm. She turns, sees Alejandro, her primo from Gabo. She kisses him quickly 3 times.
"Are you going to the corrida?"
"I have to collect my ticket. I must go."
"We have a merienda. You must come under the stands after Tomas's first bull. We're in K."
Pepper catches a glimpse of Guadalupe looking over her shoulder, disappearing into a large crowd, coming across from Avenida Federico Lorca and the Rambla.
"I'll be there, but I have to get my ticket."
Her primo keeps hold of her arm, turns to his friends.
"This is my prima, Peppa. Isn't she beautiful?"
Pepper yanks her arm away and waves to them all as she pushes through the crowd, trying to get to the Rambla. But now the tide of people is too thick against her, and Guadalupe is gone. She will never know where Barrington's daughter was taking his last painting with such purpose. She has her suspicions, but now Staffe will have to wait, sit like a duck. But after all, this was his idea to lure them into a crowd. The only place the dead can move safely, unseen. His stupid idea. She steps into a shop doorway and phones Staffe to call it off. But there is no answer. Pepper goes back into her address book. She has many contacts for the Cuerpo police, but is torn now. She points the cursor to Sanchez, remembering everything Staffe had accused him of. Instead, she scrolls to G for Guardia, where she has only one contact. Better to call Quesada.
"Your father must have been busy today," says Staffe. "It's the feria. If you're not busy for the feria, you better shut the shop," says Jesus. "It must be tough, keeping an old place like the Quinta Toro going. The bad world moves on, and the good world gets left behind." Good and bad, really. Why did Pepper call me, then run off like that? You should take her to El Marisco. "What is it with El Marisco?" says Jesus. His eyes darken and he lights up his cigarette, blows out at Staffe. "You know what it is with El Marisco, don't you, Jesus? It was the last supper for your primo. You were there, on hand, and then later you were first on the scene when Agustin was found to cover it up. What exactly happened? Did they go too far with their dissuasions? What the fuck are you talking about? Did they take Agustin into the plastic to teach him a lesson? To persuade him to back off and go back to Morocco? You said Manolo killed Agustin. Why rub our faces in it? My primo killed my primo is what you said. Is that not shame enough? Why would Manolo kill his brother, Jesus? You tell me. Jesus' eyes flit and he looks bewildered. Because he was jealous of Agustin's life, the favours he was given, and for the inheritance. But Manolo knew there was nothing to collect. What? There was nothing in Gustav's will for any of the Canos, and Manolo knew it. So why would anyone want to kill Agustin? Agustin thought he knew where Astrid was buried. He still thought if he could prove her dead, he could get the lot. But Astrid's not buried in the wood. He didn't know that, says Staffe. And what about the will? Maybe he thought he could get hold of the latest will and destroy it. In the previous version, he and Manolo got the lot. But Raoul had a copy of the new version. Raoul? Jesus fidgets. He stubs out his cigarette. For a second he puts a hand on his hip, the bulge beneath his jacket. The waiter comes across, takes the empty drinks and asks if they want more. The same again, says Jesus. Not for me. Let's talk about Astrid's lover. The American's dead too, isn't he, Jesus? Isn't he? I thought you had a bullfight to go to. It was nothing to do with the inheritance, really. Families are close down here, aren't they? But nobody trusts police, family or not. Speak for yourself. And a primo isn't the same as a brother. A brother would know things a primo wouldn't. The waiter brings his drink, and Jesus swigs lustily. You're talking shit. Talking shit in circles. So, let's take a straight line. Staffe reaches into his pocket, and Jesus flinches, puts his hand back on his hip. Agustin knew about the paintings, and like his mother before him, he threatened to expose their scam. He needed them to help prove Astrid was dead, but they wouldn't, of course. And that's what did for him. He threatened them, just like his mother did all those years ago.
When? I'm not sure. Staffe pauses, and his mind drifts a second or so. It must have been sometime around when Barrington died, I guess. Jesus looks away, seems to remember something. They were all in on it. All in on it, says Jesus. 4 of them, including your father. Staffe stands. I'm going, Jesus. Don't follow me. Why would I? I haven't finished my drink. Chapter 34. Staffe is totally hemmed in. The bench beneath is hard and his knees are tucked to his chin. He is pressed from behind and into his sides. Cigar smoke billows from left and right, and the heat is unbearable. From time to time the crowd roars, shifts, and he can barely breathe. The band strikes up, and the old woman in front turns, offers him a cake from a large oval platter. The picador runs at the bull at full speed in short strides on the balls of his feet, adjusting his angle of attack as the bull moves. Just yards away, he gets the bull in his sights, raises his hands high and vaults, planting the 2 sharpened picots into the bull's back in mid-air. The crowd whoops. The bull, confused and with seams of blood coming from the 2 wounds, doesn't know which way to turn. Staffe's 2 wounds pinch. He thinks about the ways he's been goaded in this convalescence, since Jadis Golding delivered his twin strikes to Staffe's torso. After the kill, clumsy and protracted, the man on his right pats Staffe on the back and says, "Now, Tomas, a son of Almeria." And Tomas gets the bull from the get-go. He teases, acts as the picador, and takes the sword for the kill. He is tall and slender, moving like a ballet dancer with his chin to the sun, letting the bull brush the million hand-sewn lights of his suit. Just before his kill, Tomas kisses the bull on the head, and is then fast and true with the blade. The bull's legs give way, and it dies immediately. The crowd gasps. Then all is silent before a mighty roar emerges. The crowd stands as one, twirling white handkerchiefs in the air, pleading with the president to award Tomas 2 ears. When he awards only 1, they whistle and jeer, refuse to take their seats until the 3rd bull is brought out. And all the while, some of the crowd are leaving their seats, squeezing out along the tight rows to meet family and friends below the stands for a merienda, or simply to escape the stifling heat. Staffe's phone vibrates in his pocket, and he sees it is Pepper texting. "Understand? Having drink with my primo. No escape. Come join. Get out of the sun. Great hamon and all clear. Nothing to fear." He calls her back, but gets no response. So he edges along the row, makes his way down into the bowels of the amphitheatre. When he gets down below, the narrow corridor which runs around from section to section creaks with large groups standing around drinking and picking at wondrous spreads of food, handheld. He squeezes through, sees a youth in a sombrero which has Fiestas de Gabo 2011 on its band. "Do you know Peppa? Peppa from Gabo." "She's his prima," says the youth, pointing to a tall man with his back to them. "Hey, Alejandro! Alejandro, this Guiri is looking for Peppa." Alejandro is fine-boned. His eyes are glassy, clearly the worse for drink, and he twists away from a brace of beautiful girls. "Where is my prima? Where is she?" "Peppa told me to meet her here. She said she was with you." "I haven't seen her since we came in." "Are you joking?" Staffe looks around, checking to see if Peppa is at the bar or queuing for the toilet. "Tell me!" He grabs Alejandro, makes a scruff of his silk shirt.
Hey, coño! Where is she?
One of Alejandro's friends swings a punch at Staffe, but he swerves to one side, takes a glanced blow to the head. He raises his hands. Okay, I'm sorry. But she said she was here.
Get yourself out of here, says Alejandro.
Aren't you worried about her? Staffe has a fluttering in his gut. Peppa's friends laugh.
Worried? She's not in the ring, is she? Peppa got in with the bulls. Oh, my God.
They laugh again. Staffe moves away, squeezing through the crowd and double-checking his phone. He has another message from Peppa. Keep moving anti-clockwise. Get out of the K. We'll get you. We, he says to himself, twisting in the crowd as it takes him anti-clockwise towards the J section. Ahead there is a break in the crowd where the corridor runs into a dead end at a wooden wall. He thinks it must be where they bring the bulls into the ring. Above, a mighty roar erupts and the stands shake. The crowd are stamping their feet, and he imagines it must be someone being gored. The crowd whistles, jeers, all hell breaking free. He feels something on his arm. Someone is squeezing his arm and now saying his name. Inspector! Inspector, come with me! He turns, sees the waxed moustache and large chest of Quesada, and Staffe's heart settles down. He can feel himself unclench. Quesada is smiling. "Where is Peppa?" says Staffe.
The crowd is getting agitated. Something is wrong. Come on. I can get us out of here.
She said she was with her primo, shouts Staffe.
But Quesada is moving away from the crush of people, and Staffe is shoved in the back as more people descend the stairs from the stands, even though there's nowhere to go. Someone shouts for them to go back, that there's no room, and a whole chorus of protestations ensues for the crowd to stay put in the stands. Quesada is getting further away, his green uniform stretched tight across his broad shoulders. Staffe makes a mighty effort, grabs hold of Quesada's arm. "Where are we going?" Quesada keeps moving until he gets to the wall, then shrugs Staffe's grip loose and taps a code into the pad at the side of a door in the wooden wall, disappearing through the portal. Staffe rushes through too. Others try to follow, but Quesada slams the door shut. It makes a mighty click. Someone pounds on the door, and Staffe says, "Shouldn't we let them through?"
Don't be stupid.
Suddenly, Staffe feels his arm being grabbed. He feels the roughness of Hessian pulled over his face, and everything becomes dark. He is gripped tight by both arms, dragged along, feeling the hotness of his own breath, trapped by whatever it is they've pulled down over his head. He smells cologne. He tries to resist, to twist from the hold he is in, but when he does, he loses balance and his feet leave the floor. All he can do is writhe in mid-air, blind to what is happening to him. The white noise becomes deeper, and the air around them trembles. He hears animals, close. He thinks it is the bray of a horse, then a bull snorting. The hands leave him, and for a second he is weightless. Then his head crashes against something hard, and he is horizontal. The smell of animal is overpowering now. Straw, manure, a horse's coat.
"Take it off,"
says a man. Staffe's heart quickens as he recognises the timbre of the voice, then its accent. The Hessian hood is pulled off his head, scratching his face. He blinks into the gloom, seeing many shapes. Many different, large, brooding shapes. A horse, a bull, a man in a toreador's uniform, and 3 others. One is Quesada. The others are 2 enormous handlers, clutching ropes that lead to the bull's head. The bull is in an iron pen. As his eyes adjust, Staffe sees Pepper. She is on the floor, her feet and hands bound. Beside her, the cake box. "Too late to expound the virtues of a man minding his own," says the man in the toreador's outfit. He's clean-shaven and looks the part. He must see the surprise on Staffe's face, because he says, "I did a bit once." "Very Hemingway," says Staffe. The toreador takes one pace towards Staffe, then another, then swings a foot to Staffe's ribs. "Too many people know, Jackson," wheezes Staffe. "Not true. With you and her out of the way, our little secret stays the way it is. And the last Barrington is still worth a fortune. And all the others, too. I can imagine how perilous life would become if you made a fool of those collectors." "Very clever." Staffe sits up, and one of the bull handlers says, "When do I let it out?" "If you kill me, that will arouse suspicion." "Trampled to death, trying to save your friend, the beautiful journalist. Her primo will attest," says Quesada. Amidst the smell of animal, the sweet cologne from Quesada takes him back to another dark time. "It was you who attacked me, in Raoul's flat." "Not me," said Quesada. "I thought it was Sanchez." "Sanchez is no angel." "It was you." "Not me," says Quesada. Staffe's mind whirs. He tries to work out who might have overpowered him in Raoul's flat. Angel? Quesada laughs. It turns into a sneer. "And what about you never having killed a man?" "You'll have to wait and see," says Quesada. "You did for Edu, and Manolo. You were in on it with Sanchez. He left you behind in Almagen to keep an eye on that body in the woods, and he took fine care of you and your career." "You were wrong about that body in the woods, though. Your speculations amount to nothing, Inspector." Quesada nods to the bull handlers. "No!" shouts Staffe. "There's something we all need to sort out." He looks around. The crowd, way up in the stands, gasps again. Then a band strikes up. He has no plan, just to try and acquire a little more time. The bull handler pulls back the bottom bolt of the pen. "Listen to him!" shouts Pepper. Staffe looks at Jackson. "Did you make that film of Manolo?" "No." "Was it all you?" Jackson looks at Quesada. "You overestimate me." "But you killed Astrid." "I loved her, you fool." "You loved her enough to kill her," says Staffe. "You can tell from the paintings." "Enough to kill her? That's a strange thing to say," says Jackson, his eyes glazing. "I could never harm that woman." The handler pulls the middle boat across, and Quesada says to the other handler, "You'll need to get the bull riled." "And Raoul? You knew he was going to put me in the picture that night up in your cortijo, so you stopped us talking. The next day you went for him and he drove away, but you cut him off at the bridge on your motorbike. You stopped him talking good and proper and made it look like a crash. You're good at making things look like something they're not." "Shut up," says Quesada. Staffe says, "They know all about the last Barrington at the university." "It's leaving the country, you prick," says Jackson. "I have a buyer. It's the last." Pepper is on the floor, slowly adjusting her position, a flickering determination in her eyes. The handler returns to the pen with a pair of picots. They're sharpened to a lethal point and adorned with baby blue ribbons on the handles. He stands on the bottom bar of the metal pen and raises the picos high above his head, leans forward and lunges with all his might, plunging the wooden spears into the bull's back. The bull swings its head and kicks out with its back legs, clattering the pen as two thick rivulets of blood begin to stream down the bull's back from the wounds. The horse rears up on its hind legs, then cowers into a corner of the small enclosure. "At least let the horse out," shouts Staffe, "or the bull will kill it." "It'll do for you first." "You can't get away with this." Jackson takes a step closer. "Whose idea was it? To make it look like a ghost?" "Does it matter?" "I know who the ghost is." "What?" says Quesada. "And so does the cuerpo." "Bullshit," says Jackson. "When you think about it, who else could it be? And you did the same to Agustin. Was that an accident too?" Staffe looks at Quesada. "Not exactly the product of an original mind." "He had every chance to leave," says Quesada. "But he needed to prove Astrid was dead," says Staffe. "His own mother. And Manolo needed that too, but not for the money. He had to know she didn't abandon him, and for that he is dead." "What was done is done," says Jackson. Pepper turns onto her side. At the far end of the pen, a cattle prod is propped against the wall. She stretches her foot out, rests it against the base of the prod. Jackson turns to the bull handler, says, "That bull's mad enough now. Come on, get against the door." Staffe tries to stand, but Jackson takes a swift step towards him and kicks out, karate style, catching Staffe full in the chest with the sole of his boot. He pulls out his knife, his goat's head knife. "Stab me and your story collapses, unless your brigada here can prove the bull can hold a knife." "I will be telling the story," says Quesada. "To anybody who is interested, it will look like a bull had gored you, believe me." "Which it will do," says Jackson. "You've got some pact going on," says Staffe. "Pact?" says Jackson. "But any pact is only as strong as its weakest link." "You're full of shit. Yours has survived the test of time, I'll grant you that, since Edu guessed what was going on with Barrington's painting." "Edu hated Barrington," says Jackson. "But he needed the money. And then the day Barrington died, you had no choice but to bury the truth." "What?" "I can picture you all there that day, you and Rubio, and Edu and Angel, just like in the photograph." "What photograph?" says Quesada. "You in the background, and no sign of Astrid." On the periphery of his vision, Staffe sees Pepper shift. She moves inch by inch. "And Santi Estebateria? How did he fit into your plans, Jackson?" "I'd never heard of the son of a bitch till Raoul turned up like the bad penny. You have to take what you can in life." He goes into his pocket, unfolds the newspaper article to reveal the images of Staffe's father and mother. "You can see how it will aid matters if this is on your person. The authorities don't want to stir the shit with Etta just now." Staffe's bile rises. "Cortez and Peralta know where Astrid is." Jackson turns to the handler. "Let's get this done." He and Quesada are both by the door now, and the handler reaches for the final bolt. One meaningful tug, and the pen's door will swing open. The other handler yells, "Wait!" and edges to the door too. The horse rears up again, and Pepper pushes out with one foot, and the cattle prod falls towards her. She grabs the handle, careful not to touch the two protruding metal prongs, and uncoils, reaching out with the prod, Jackson in her sights. Jackson plants his feet wide and readies his knife, and it strikes Pepper that she has no way of knowing whether the prod is charged, and if it is charged, what kind of a shock it will inflict. Suddenly she wishes she had stayed put. The blade of his knife glints as he comes towards her. She steps forward, lunges. The prod is 3 feet long, and it jabs into Jackson's chest. He yelps, looks her in the eye, and his legs give way. But he holds out a hand, supports himself from complete collapse. As he forces himself to his feet, Pepper lunges again, and Jackson shudders, drops back to his knees. The knife falls to the dirt. Staffe thinks that the charge may be running down, can see that Jackson may revitalize, and he works his way round towards the horse. Quesada calls, "Let the bull out!" "No!" shouts Jackson, picking up his knife. "I'm in the way!" "Let the bull out!" shouts Quesada. "That's an order!" Staffe stands up, rushes behind the horse and grabs its tail, smacks it on the hindquarters with all his might, and the horse rears up. He pushes as hard as he can, and the horse kicks back, but Staffe jumps to one side, slaps its quarters again, shouts at the top of his voice, "Charge!" Quesada pulls out his pistol, levels it at the handler. "No!" shouts Jackson. Pepper lunges again, knocks Jackson back to the ground, and he looks up, dazed, his strength ebbing. But he steels himself and rolls away, seeing the fear in the handler's eyes as he pulls back the bolt, the bull baying at him. The horse charges across the room towards the door, and Jackson rolls again. The gate to the pen clatters open, and the bull makes its move, but the horse is charging for the door. Jackson is on his feet, getting on the blind side of the horse and running for the door. The bull kicks out with its back legs, rearing round, spoiled for targets, and Quesada has no choice. He opens the door on the far side of the enclosure and runs through as light floods the room and the roar of the crowd booms down from the arena. The bull charges for the light and the sound. It runs, choosing freedom, chasing after Quesada, the horse, and Jackson. The three run along the short, high-walled tunnel and into the amphitheatre. Quesada is first into the arena, trying to get across the ring to the opposite exit, but the bull catches up with him. Thomas, calm and slow, steps in, and with 1, 2 expert wafts of his cloak, turns the escape bull's attention away from Quesada. He steps back, supremely elegant, drawing the bull further and further away. But as he does, his own bull, the finest, 5th bull, the Quinta Toro, charges for Quesada. First, the bull gets him in the thigh. Next, dipping its head, its horns searching out the heart, the Quinta Toro gets him in the shoulder. The crowd groans, and a posse of caped toreadors rush out, tempting the bull away with their swishing colours of red and yellow, like so many Spanish flags in the wind. But this bull isn't for stopping. It is the finest bull. Back beneath the stands, Jesus steals into the enclosure. He raises his gun, levels it at Pepper. She lowers the cattle prod, says, "No, not you." A shot rings out. In the arena, the 5th bull jolts. As it gores Quesada a last time, straight to the heart, it takes a bullet to its head. It stands back up, momentarily as if milking applause, and then collapses onto the brigada, pressing the last gust of life from Quesada.
Jesus' finger is on the trigger still. He has a bead on Pepper. Staffe shouts, "No!" and rushes at Jesus, who quickly switches his aim. He looks Staffe in the eye, and Staffe can see his heart is not in it. Jesus keeps his eyes firmly on Staffe and begins to squeeze. Closing his eyes, a second shot rings out. Jesus opens his eyes. Policeman to policeman, and as if frozen in time, he and Staffe stare each other out. Staffe reaches for his heart, waits for the pain to come, and as he waits, he sees Jesus falling away from him. It is like the way the earth shifts when a boat makes its first slow move from port. Jesus falls further away. He staggers out, stands at the head of the tunnel. With the entire crowd on its feet and screaming, the young policeman falls to the golden floor of the ring, and slowly, blood begins to flow from his shoulder. He lies on his back in the sun and smiles, feels life coursing through his veins and into the sand. Hand on heart, Staffe turns, sees Sanchez lowering his pistol. The commissario walks slowly towards him, and, as if a long quest has reached its end, wraps his thin arms around Staffe like a proud father might, the smell of cigars and cologne thick and sweet, and together they walk into the ring, see Quesada being lifted onto a stretcher, a red blanket being pulled up over his face. The bull is dragged away through the sand. "Where is Jackson?" says Staffe. "Nowhere to be seen." Chapter 35. Guadalupe sits by her mother, dabbing her forehead with a folded, wet flannel. She dips it back into the bowl of water on the bedside table, wrings the excess, and whispers that she wishes they could have spent more time together, but she had to get out of Almagen as soon as she could. Immaculada smiles thinly. Staffe tries to imagine what it would have been like for Guadalupe, growing up here as the bastard daughter of a foreigner. Her grandfather, the mayor. He remembers what Pepper had told him about how much Immaculada loved Barrington. What might it mean to Immaculada if she could be forgiven by her daughter for not loving her well enough? He cannot begin to understand what tricks it must play if you loved a lover more than your child, especially a cheating lover. Immaculada's eyes close, and he holds his breath. For a moment he thinks she's passed away, but her shallow breasts rise and fall. Guadalupe says to him, "I have the painting in the other room." "That's not what I came for," says Staffe. "And you should keep it." "No, it's not worth a bean," she says, managing a smile. They both look at her mother, sleeping. "You didn't know it was a forgery?" She shakes her head. "You knew nothing of the scam that your father and Jackson conjured up?" "Not the slightest." "Your Uncle Edu did?" "He always was on my father's case." She dips the cloth into a bowl of water, wrings it, and wipes the sweat from her mother's face and neck. "It doesn't surprise me he found a way to profit from my father's fame." Jackson must have spoken about Astrid. He told me he could never harm her, and I believe him, which makes me think her death was an accident. "You know she is dead?" "We will later today." "How?" "Where is Jackson Roberts, Guadalupe?" She shrugs. "He's the only one who knows the whole truth." "Sometimes, shouldn't the truth just be there? Does it always have to be known?" They're going to try to prosecute Rubio Cano for his wife's murder. I don't think he did it. He was just there, just like your truth is always there. But he didn't kill his wife. Do you think Jackson did? No. They both loved her too much. She was killed for money. My Uncle Edu? Perhaps. Or Angel Cano. He knew about the paintings too. Rubio cut him in, I think. That bar down in Almeria was on his last legs, but they couldn't let it go. Angel needed the money. The rest of them just wanted it. So Jackson is innocent? Not exactly. You can expect a visit from Sanchez. He wants to nail you. Why? Because he wants to nail Jackson. Staffe has learned a little of what it must be like to love your country too much. Perhaps Sanchez is the last generation that understands absolutely what there is to preserve of the old life, of the Spain Barrington discovered, then slowly uncovered, in Almagen, when he fell in love with the place and one or more of its people, for all its secrets. "What will happen to Angel?" asked Guadalupe. "I always did like him. My father would take me to the Quinta Toro during the fiesta." She laughs, an unhappy laugh. "He would disappear off with Rubio and Angel would look after me. He fed me those livers with the star anise. You know, I never tasted anything like it since. It would get so busy in the Quinta Toro in those days. What will happen to it now?" Telefonica are next door. They say they'd like to expand. When my father and Rubio were done, Rubio would come back into the bar and hug me. He smelled of cheap scent, and his eyes would be swimming. My father wouldn't hug me. I remember in that crowded bar he stood all alone. He looked as if he had lost something. Staffe leaves Guadalupe to the belated moments of peace with her mother. He eases the large door gently closed behind him, walks down through the white, tight streets built by the Moors. Earlier, he had spoken to the Hesse family solicitor, had told him about Gustav's will, and the solicitor was delighted. He said Gustav would perhaps be able to find peace, finally. Staffe passes through the church square. There is more than a little of the mudeja about the place of worship, and he tries to picture the scene in Africa when they hear that foreigners are giving them a new school, that water will come up from the dry earth. Life becomes a little less cheap. He feels gooseflesh in the hot sun. Thinks also of Yusuf, walking to Moulay Idris with his euros in his burnous. Salva has laid a large table in the Placeta outside Bar Fuente. Bottles of Contraviesa wine and jugs of beer are set out, and everyone is sitting down already. Sanchez is at the head, out of uniform and carving extravagant slivers of serrano, a fat cohiba in his mouth, and the smell of cologne on the warm breeze. Jesus is on his right, his arm in a sling, and Peppa his left. She is on the phone, reading from a piece of paper, presenting final amendments to her sub-editor. When they searched Quesada's finca above Messina, they found the keys for an apartment in Palma, Mallorca, documents for a boat in Poyensa, and offshore bank statements for a company based in Caracas. In front of Peppa, on the table, is her dictaphone, now out of its beautifully wrapped and ribboned cake box, and containing everything that Jackson and Quesada had said down in the bowels of the Plaza de Toros. Paolo and Marie are at the other end of the table, and Frog and a smattering of old goats make up the numbers, plus the mayor and 2 empty places. One is for Staffe, who is shown to his seat by Consuela, carrying baskets of bread. "Who is the other seat for?" says Staffe.
Consuela bites her lip and hurries inside.
Frog says, "Manolo, we are paying respects."
"I thought you didn't like him," says Staffe.
"There's plenty you don't understand about us still."
Frog stands up, offering Staffe a glass of red wine.
"But you're good enough."
He raises his glass.
"To Manolo."
Everybody stands.
"Good health, money and love."
Salva comes out, carrying a suckling pig on a large silver platter. Consuela follows, carrying the same again, and everyone round the table begins to fuss, recharging their wine and imploring Sanchez to carve the ham faster before the pig gets cold. But before he can, Salva calls the table to order. He leans across and picks up 2 plates, holds them high, bringing them down on a pair of crisped suckling pigs, and with a rat-a-tat-tat, he carves the pigs simultaneously, using only the plates. So succulent are they, their flesh falls away, and everyone round the table applauds. Pepper finally gets off the phone and comes to Staffe, bending down and kissing him on both cheeks, lingering. She whispers,
"I have something for you."
He feels a weight in his lap and looks down at a large brown paper package. It is tied in baling twine. She says,
"It's everything Raoul had on Santi Echte Batteria."
As they eat, the mayor explains that the Academia Barrington will be built on the site of the old salon behind the church.
The junta don't mind about what has happened? The forgeries?
The mayor says,
Barrington is more famous than ever now. They will come in their droves to Almaden.
Staffe looks around at the barefooted, nut-brown children frolicking in the fountain. The ladies in black and needle-pointing in small clusters, sitting on reed chairs with their feet in dust beneath the trees. The old boys are coming out from the campo with their donkeys. Staffe wonders what is really best for this special place.
"And you will be here? You're staying?"
says Sanchez. "I'm staying," says Staffe.
"Of course he is,"
says Marie, craning to allow Paolo to spoon the cochinillo into her mouth. In her lap, sleeping baby Enid.
"To the English inspector,"
says Sanchez, raising his glass.
"To strangers,"
shouts the frog, and everybody drinks. They eat quickly, hoovering up the cochinillo, and little is said for a long while, as everyone tries to absorb what has happened, what is to come. Jesus is quietest of all. Sanchez stands, reignites his cohiba, taking it to the shade of the fig tree in the corner of the placeta. Staffe follows him, refuses a cigar. It's amazing how this story told itself. Sometimes you find a little truth, and a whole lot more reveals itself. Sometimes not. That's not true, and you know it. You had to dig.
"For the truth,"
says Sanchez. "For the body. You dug a channel. You diverted the stream to the body in my sister's woods. I knew something had gone on up there, it's true." "But you knew they did for Astrid. Is that why you were moved out to Almeria?"
"I did all right out of it. I soon got ahead of Quesada."
"Someone must have told you. They must have told you exactly where."
"Can't we let it lie?"
Staffe shakes his head. "That's not how we got here." They both look across to the table outside Salva's. Jesus struggles to light a cigarette for himself and one for Peppa. They move a little closer. Sanchez says,
"Jesus is a fine young man. Amazing that the son can be a better man than the father. I never thought that. Will he be all right? Staffe and Sanchez look across to Jesus, trying to put a brave face on. He very nearly succumbed to temptation. He thinks he betrayed his father, his whole family, but he has done the only thing a policeman can do. Because you stepped in, says Staffe. Let God bless him and forgive him his loyalty. It was definitely Angel who killed Agustin. Angel has coughed up. He says they never meant for it to happen, and they just wanted to scare Agustin, send him on his way, and then when he resisted and it went too far, they had to do what they did to cover up who had been killed. The four of them were up in the mountains the night Barrington passed away, says Staffe. Astrid wanted to go to Morocco and for Jackson to go with her, and when he said no, she said she would expose them all. Some of those collectors are very influential people, as you can imagine. They'd have lost a fortune. On paper, says Sanchez. For some people, it's only the paper that matters. So when Astrid tried to leave, they stopped her. Angel swears she fell and fractured her skull. We shall see. They both look up the street that leads down from the church, sees the priest walking slowly towards them, with Cortez and Peralta in tow. So they called Quesada, and it was his idea to bury her in the style of a Ladrones. Sanchez nods, takes out the papers from the pocket of his jacket. And Quesada took care of Agustin, Edu, and Manolo. According to Angel, he says the idea was to pin it all on Jackson Roberts, if they ever got caught. But as soon as he knew he was losing his bar, Angel gave up the game. It's the call of history. Some hear it too loudly. But Roberts killed Raoul. You'll catch up with him for that, surely. Sanchez smiles. Sometimes the bad guy can be innocent. He pulls out a clear plastic evidence bag from his pocket. A small cutting of cloth that looks like a blotched sample of a Spanish flag. Raoul's blood, says Staffe. And Quesada's prints. You saw the rag when I did, from the bridge. I warned you not to look, says Sanchez. To make sure I did. The priest approaches Sanchez, and they each make a small bow. Sanchez delves into the inside pocket of his jacket, produces some papers which he hands to the priest, who casts his eye over them, walking towards the cemetery, followed by Cortez and Peralta. Then Sanchez and Staffe. The rest of the diners follow, and slowly the villagers come out, processing slowly. The gravediggers bring up the rear, their tools slung over their shoulders like guns. The sun beats down on the shadeless graveyard, and the village stands in silence as the diggers open up the tomb, trying not to disturb the dead. It says, Hugo Barrington, artist, 1914 to 1999. Much loved in a foreign land. When the corpse is exposed, Cortez steps in, carefully easing the cadaver out and resting it on the ground, uncovering the body which is preserved in a way the victim in the woods never could be. It is, unmistakably, Astrid. When Cortez is done, Staffe opens his wallet and hands him the pressed ball of Barrington's hair. Cortez says, To prove your sister doesn't live amongst ghosts. Staffe looks away, looks all around him, to see if they're being watched from a safe place. But the sun blinds him, so he looks back towards the village. Still, he feels the presence of Jackson Roberts out there somewhere. He shields his eyes, and beyond the line of villagers, he sees a woman walking slowly towards him. From the way she moves, he knows her. She wears a white cotton dress that shimmers like water. Her legs are paler than he has become accustomed to, and she too holds her hand to her eyes against the brilliance of the sun. Her face is obscured, but his heart skips a beat, and he feels hollow in his stomach. At first, he thinks this is because of the portent she must bring. But he knows it is probably something more. For a moment, Staffe thinks he might be in dreams. Staffe watches her all the way, and although Cortez says something to him, he doesn't hear it. All the time she gets closer. Finally, she is in front of him, says, "Good afternoon, sir." "Josie, what are you doing here?" "It's Pulford." "What's happened?" "Jadis Golding is dead." Staffe looks at Josie and wants to hug her, to embrace what he thinks she represents. Pulford has been following Golding for months and harassing Jasmine Cash. He can't account for where he was. He was the last person Golding phoned. "I know Pulford, and I know he didn't kill Jadis Golding. He couldn't do it." Josie smiles weakly, and it evaporates like spilled water in the Almachen dust. Beyond Josie, Harry runs out from the square. He is soaking wet from playing in the washstands, and Gracia runs after him, calling, "Harry! Harry!" But Harry runs straight for his uncle. Breathless, Harry says, "What's wrong? What's happened?" "They want me to go home, Harry." "Well, you said this was home." "I should leave you to it, sir," says Josie. "No." He puts his hand on the small of Josie's back, keeps it there as he guides her back towards the square. "There are some friends I'd like you to meet." "You'll come back with me," she says softly, as they walk together. He doesn't reply, just wishes they could carry on walking this way a while longer. Death in the Sun by Adam Creed. Read by Jonathan Oliver.
Thank you for listening to this unabridged Oak Hill audiobook. If you'd like to listen to further titles, please contact your local library.